Okay, so this is my presentation, public domain presentation, and I probably might put this on 4chan or some other stuff, just to increase the discussion about pornography addiction. I'm not against pornography necessarily, but it's definitely an issue, especially for millennials, and I'll explain why by going into Rule 34 and some strategies which I think might help tackle pornography addiction. I think that the issue is a great one, and that there needs to be better things that needs to be done potentially, and there might be some solutions that might not necessarily harm the pornography industry. The pornography industry has often been a free speech haven, and is, well, the saying goes, world's oldest profession, so it is never going to go away completely, potentially. So I'm calling this this presentation, the unholy fight against porn addiction continues, the anti-succubus strategy, tips and understanding about porn addiction. I'm sometimes known as Ramblings of a South Asian on social media. I'm quite new, and I'm calling this as the ASS strategy because of the do it for the plot, and also many millennials who are into what do you call it? Your My Little Pony. There's the Twilight Sparkle. There's Mordecai. When various things we're memeing on YouTube, which I'm not going to talk about, which may or may not have included Adolf Hitler. It's weird. Millennials had like one weird childhood. So before I go into this, let's just explain some law. So the law behind this is that a succubus is a fictional, I'm calling it anti-succubus strategy because it's easy to remember, but a succubus in law is a fictional demon that tries to make people porn addicted, lustful through sexual and wet dreams or dream magic. And this is kind of like my marketing strategy, but I'm not trying to sell anything here. Please don't feel like I'm trying to sell anything, but I want this to be talked about, and I think that porn addiction is a massive thing, and it really needs to be tackled, and there could be potential solutions that people have out there. I might make a few videos later on about how to tackle the issue of porn addiction, but I'm trying to keep things concise and one thing per presentation. So do it for the plot of trying to beat porn addiction, or keep it under control. When you're porn addicted, you will very often be very smelly, and you have to shower multiple times a day, and people know when you've masturbated in the room. So this video is probably going to end up on something like BitChute, because unfortunately, I have multiple channels. Some of them I use as backups. Unfortunately, although I agree that pornography shouldn't be allowed on YouTube because children access that site and children need to be protected, unfortunately, the type of things that are being discussed here is potentially not allowable by YouTube, unless you're a big shot or something, I don't know. But I'm sometimes known by this name. Okay, so this is a kind of a brief summary. This is like an amateur presentation about what I will be discussing. So as a light-hearted initial talk, I will talk about like succubi and dream catchers. So some people say that if you buy a dream catcher, you won't have wet dreams, but some of them can be quite cheap, some of them aren't. I don't know if the myth is real, but don't waste money on these kinds of things. Remember, as a young man, many of the people are porn addicted. Money is important, so it's always a good idea not to necessarily waste money on these kind of things. Sometimes I think that we don't waste money. I'm okay with girls watching this as well, as much as girls, because girls like waste so much money on like lip gloss and nail varnish and stuff like that. But at the same time, like RGB like desktops and computers, like NVIDIA GTX Titans, or like what generation are we on now? Like 380 Ti or 480 Ti are quite expensive as well. And then I'm going to talk about why I think millennials were exposed to pornography in quite a subtle manner, in which society didn't really have the know-how to help them, and why it could cause problems, even to the point of things like accidental paedophilia, which I'll explain at the end to this generation. And I'll talk about how pornography could have, as I've said, implicitly been introduced to the millennial generation from a young age, accidentally, or in a very uncontrolled manner, even though it might have helped many people. For some people, pornography genuinely is an out card in terms of staying sane, or the world around them is quite harsh. And I'll be discussing things like Rule 34, E621, the fairy website, and Newsgrounds, which isn't really used anymore since Flash was rolled out. And then earlier video game magazines. I'll talk about how early video games magazines. So video games are well known now. Pretty much loads of people use them. Not everyone. Some religious people don't use them, and some people don't have time for them anymore. Maybe compared to when you were a kid. Some people just play idle games on like Steam. Sometimes just to like show that they're socializing with people or pretend to socialize. That's always a good idea. Like if you're in a job interview and you have like an idle game, and then you're like that you keep while you're like doing like an assignment or something, and you can be like in a job interview like, yeah, this is what I do in my free time. And then I'll be talking about various other things like the free speech debate. I'm not sure if I took that slide out, but if I am discussing it, I am discussing it. So coming back to this video game magazine thing, so the early video game industry was actually very negatively stereotyped, in my opinion. And because of that, the porn industry had to fund it in terms of adverts. I'm not when I talk about these sites, I actually think that they should exist, but I'm not trying to make any negative judgments about them. I'm just trying to talk about what my feelings as an actual millennial myself on them is. And I'm wondering, well, I'm not entirely sure whether or not these same problems affect the gens below us. I don't know what gen is it, Gen Y, Gen Z, or whatever. So, first of all, as I mentioned, a succubus, I'm calling it the anti-succubus strategy. I don't know if it will have a meme, but the anti-succubus is the ass strategy, because many video game characters are sexy, and a succubus is a demon or supernatural entity in folklore, in female form, according to Wikipedia, the best source, that appears in dreams to seduce men, usually through sexual activity. According to religious tradition, a succubus needs semen to survive. Repeated sexual activity with succubus will result in a bond being formed between the succubus and the man, and the succubus cannot drain or harm the man with whom she's having intercourse. Now there is another version of the succubus, which is known as an incubus, which I think is a male version of the succubus, but and succubus and incubi are in various video games. But I don't know whether they are real, but some people say that dream catchers ward them off and prevent you from having wet dreams, but I don't know if that's sure. Please don't waste money on them if that isn't your thing, but I don't know if that's like a cultural thing. I don't know which culture dream catchers are from. But so this is from Wikipedia, this information. I've always wondered, like, there should be like an actual like text-to-speech translation problem function on Wikipedia, or people should like put like just read Wikipedia documents and put them on YouTube. Like Wikipedia articles, people could in their free time maybe like read one Wikipedia article on a day, and then like put it on the actual Wikipedia page itself. Because many people with learning disabilities, like porn addicted people, can't read properly. Porn addiction can ruin things like the like dopamine pathways, like mesolimbic pathway, your basal ganglia, that can make you clumsy and stuff like can really affect you. Can really affect your executive function in some cases. So I think that simple things like making Wikipedia text-to-speech, that could be something that's done voluntarily. Maybe like have a subreddit where everyone like video records them reading a Wikipedia page and then puts what date they read it on, because Wikipedia page gets updated. But that is one way to make society more acceptable. That's not really relevant to pornography awareness thing, but if anyone's looking for something to do, that is a good idea. So a bit more about this. So we know about no-fap strategies. So no-fap strategies, I'm going to call it the anti-succubus strategy, because I like the phrase because succubi, because they're fictional, I'm not directing it towards anyone. One of the problems is that the porn industry is a genuine part of Western culture. In my opinion, it is a part of Western culture. There are people like in medical schools or students who sometimes fund their education in, I don't know, maybe in some countries, I don't know if it's true or not, from what I've heard from things like OnlyFans and things like that. I've never used OnlyFans myself, but I personally don't like the idea of paying someone for that kind of content. I mean, it's freely available from something like Pornhub or X videos, but the phrasing it in terms of things like anti-succubus strategy, like allows people to be a bit more imaginative, and it doesn't like direct the discussion at anyone in particular. Porn studios not going to be necessarily happy if I called it like anti-porn strategy, because it doesn't necessarily mean to be anti-porn strategy. But I mentioned wet dream before, but wet dream is when a guy ejaculates or comes when he's sleeping. The man often notice it on the semen on their underwear or pajama pants, and wet dreams often happen during during dreams, sometimes people have sexual urges. So sometimes you have a dream that is really, really sexual, and then you notice that you ejaculate in the morning, and then you have to wash things or change your underwear. Please remember to change your underwear. I've forgot done that myself sometimes. Sometimes, like when you're like video gaming and stuff, it's not. I am responsible myself, but it is the general truth. So wet dreams can be normal according to sexual health, but porn addicts may be predisposed to them, and this can be disappointing and cause relapse in a man. So if you have a wet dream, do not necessarily think of it. I'm not qualified myself, although I do like. I'm not going to speak about it, but I'm not qualified myself. So do your research online, but there is a lack of discussion online on some of these matters. So do not panic. So you do not necessarily have to panic if you have a wet dream, and normally the semen stays are closed or your underwear. But there is a lot of discussion that could be had. Like, for example, does the type of porn that you watch influence your wet dreams, or what does and does not disappear in wet dream? Like, what would that like reveal about the nature of the brain? That'd be an interesting idea, but I'm not sure if that's directly related to NoFap or pornography awareness or anti-succubus strategy. So now I'm going to talk about porn addiction. So why is porn, like, there's various reasons, this potentially like a load of reasons about why porn addiction is bad. So porn addiction for multiple reasons, but contribute to popular belief. Maybe you might not know that porn addiction can come under a variety of things. So there's softcore porn, where it's like people like are just clothed, but it's like suggestive, and then there's like cartoon pornography, and then there's like furry pornography in sites like E621, and then there's like furry pornography, and then there's like lolicon pornography, there's toddlercon pornography, that is potentially illegal, and then there is what is it, cub pornography. So this is, I'll leave that discussion for another time as what counts as child pornography. I am not a believer in child pornography myself, but it's interesting to think about it. So for example, although it is interesting, so let us do a thought experiment for a minute. So what counts as a paedophile? So in my opinion, paedophilia, you could say it is wrong, because a child cannot protect themselves. There is a massive power differential. But in terms of online content, so obviously, let's say a 30-year-old having on with a 10-year-old, that is wrong. But let's say, for example, a 19-year-old does it with a 17-year-old. Who is a paedophile in this instance? So this is where very often when it comes to paedophilia, it is wrong. It produces very visceral reaction. When it comes to things like paedophilia, for most people, at least maybe on a cognitive level, the sort of idea of a child being harmed that way is infuriating. There's always something redeeming, even about stealing for something. If you stole something when you were young from a shop, or if you stole to eat, I don't know, if in a poverty-driven country, you could see like I went to jail because I had to steal for my family. Or you could be like, I was in war. Like, think about World War II and World War II. So Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and something else, and then the US, Germany, Italy, and Japan, and the rest other people. Like, you could argue that even though like Germany, lost and other things, you could still argue that some people were drawn into the war because they needed money, and there were people who had to get transcripted. So say that you are a German and your grandfather was in the war, you could actually say that they were transcripted into the war, and the same thing to the British side. They were transcripted. Conscripted, not transcripted, conscripted into the war. So you could be like, they had to do what they have to do. Has anyone ever heard of the Percy Jackson series of like books? I think millennials grew up with Percy Jackson, a series of books similar to Harry Potter. There's actually a series in there where like some of the people there side with the Titans and not the gods, because they are related to the actual Titans, and sometimes you have to support your family. But when it comes to like genuine paedophilia, like, it's important to have discussions on it. But I'm not talking about this, but this is going to segue into something that's necessary to this. This is an interesting idea, because sometimes some paedophiles, from what I've done reading text, genuinely want admit it, and they don't, and they're scared of talking about it, or they go to their GP and they want to be sterilized sexually, permanently, so they don't have sexual impulses, or they don't pose a threat to other people. So there's paedophile hunting gangs, and it is a genuine crime, in my opinion, one of the worst crimes. There's nothing redeemable. In prison, I've heard that paedophiles don't get it nicely. But that's pretty much with every other crime, there is something redeemable. With paedophilia, there is nothing that much redeemable. But I think society needs to let the experience, needs to be careful about not letting the viscerality of it, like, prevent us from giving people, like, the right periods of questioning, potentially. Because think about it. If a 17-year-old slept with a 19-year-old, who is a paedophile? If a 16-year-old girl sleeps with a 15-year-old boy, who is the actual paedophile? And those are interesting questions. But I'm talking about this because this segues into this, because our generation, Rule 34 is now more heavily policed, grew up with things like Lisa Simpson pornography and other than pornography, and pornography with cartoon characters. And our generation is a generation that kind of, like, took shipping, or invented shipping to a whole new level. Like, there's even, like, Avatar: The Last Airbender shipping. So if the art counts as pornography, what would, like, erotic literature count as? Or, like, Lisa Simpson, Bart Simpson erotic literature count as? And some of that was written while our generation were children. So would they be paedophiles? And if they did it out of habit later on, would they still be paedophiles? And when you think about cub pornography, so for example, if I had this lady here from the Rule 34 website, one of the Rule 34 mascots, if she was a child, that could count as lolicon. And this is also a bit weird, because that is not naked, but that is obviously like a, I don't know, some kind of incubus or something. It's very odd, but there's cub pornography in the furry industry, which is similar to other pornography. But why do people do this? I don't know. I'm not going to cast judgment, and I'm going to come out. I might actually be honest with this. This kind of stuff kept me sane earlier on. I'm not a paedophile, but this kind of stuff kept me sane earlier on. But then I stopped going for it later on because I am actually heterosexual and attracted to adults. But I'm just talking about it because I actually think in the future that a police force or other members of society, like the boomers, might not understand it, and millennials might potentially be sent in the future to prison for being accidental paedophiles. And porn really was an extrinsic part of our culture. So Flash, our generation grew up with Flash, or Adobe Flash Player, which is now outdated and has been replaced with other things like HTML5, I think. Game sites like Congregate are no longer used that much. That is, the symbol for that isn't on here, and I really apologise to anyone who isn't happy with these symbols, but I'm trying to have a free speech discussion. But these are some excellent websites. The art that some of these people make is amazing. Newsgrounds is amazing, E61 is amazing, News34 is amazing. But I'm just going to show you a video of how much of an example pornography had on the millennial generation, especially where for people who are lonely had nothing else.
Old Godzilla was fucking around Tokyo City like a big playground, when suddenly Batman jizzed from the shade and hit Godzilla with a bat cum spray. Godzilla got laid and began to fuck back, but didn't expect to be fucked by Shaq, who proceeded to open up a can of Shaq lube when Aaron Carter came out of the blue, and he started sucking off Shaquille O'Neal in the backseat of the Batmobile. Before they could make it back to Aaron's love shack, Abraham Lincoln teabagged his sack, took a 9-inch vibrator out of his hat and blew Batman. Then he ran out of rubbers and he ran away, because Optimus Prime came on Batman's face. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality. Good guys and bad guys with dildos. As far as the eye can see, there's quite a lot of fellatio and much sodomy. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality. Godzilla took a shit on Optimus Prime like Scruff McGruff, shit all over crime. And then Shaq came back covered in Godzilla's scat. Then Jackie Chan jacked off and nutted on his back. And Batman was frustrated and trying to get horny, so he thought of an armadillo named Corey. But suddenly something caught his eye and he licked Indiana Jones' 13-inch dick. Then he took Godzilla from behind, reached around for his cock, which he just couldn't find. Then Batman squirted and he shot and he missed, and penetrated Jackie Chan with his fist. Then he jumped in the air and he gave the peace sign as Abraham Lincoln tried to 69 with Optimus Prime, and they both got some. Then they all got showered in Care Bear cum. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality. Good guys and bad guys with dildos. As far as the eye can see, it's gayer than Brokeback Mountain. I think you would agree. This is the ultimate orgy. Cue porno music, a funky jive chorus. heavens came naked Chuck Norris, who discovered a dick as hard as bones, attached to the crotch of Indiana Jones. He bent over on the ground, smiling with glee, as Batman changed into Ron Jeremy. But Chuck saw through this clever disguise and buried Batman's face in between his thighs. Then Gandalf the pimp and Gandalf the hoe, Matt Damon and the guys from Mr. Show, and Benito Mussolini and his big beanie, and Tony Curtis in a pink bikini, Robocop the Terminator, William Shatner, Ralph Nader, Lopan, Peter Pan, every male Power Ranger, Keanu Reeves and Bill S. Preston, Spock the Rock and Charlton Heston came out of nowhere lightning fast, and they all fucked Norris in his cowboy ass. It was the greatest bukkake that the world ever saw, making Japanese men stare in total awe. Sex went on for a century, many cocks were sucked, but eventually a champion stood. All the girls got wetter, Mr. Rogers in a cum-stained sweater. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality. Hot chicks and bad girls with strap-ons, as far as the eye can see. Tits and vaginas and coming all continuously. This is the ultimate orgy. Great big lesbian orgy. This is the ultimate orgy. I think I'll jerk off again. This is the ultimate orgy. Homosexuality.
Okay, so this is an interesting one. So this is a video that memed when people were in secondary school, in millennials, maybe year 7, year 8. And where I was, so I went to a very, very, not a private school, but I went to what was considered a very competitive school. So this is where the good kids went. I'm not saying that everyone isn't good kids, but this is a point, because if this is where the good kids went, I can only imagine where the what it was like for rough schools where they have problems and issues with behavior, more likely to have problems with issues with behavior. Just watch this video, and this was on a site called Newsgrounds where creative things were happening. It still exists, but the person who made this didn't make it necessarily to get people deliberately addicted to to porn and things like that. But out of creative endeavour. This is a cultural thing to the millennial generation, in my opinion. Although some people might agree with me. So just listen to this.
Godzilla was fucking around Tokyo City like a big playground, when suddenly Batman jizzed from the shade and hit Godzilla with a bat cum spray. Godzilla got laid and began to fuck back, but didn't expect to be fucked by Shaq, who proceeded to open up a can of Shaq Blue when Aaron Carter came out of the blue and started sucking off Shaquille O'Neal in the backseat of the Batmobile. Before they can make it back to Aaron's love shack, Abraham Lincoln teabagged his sack, took a 9-inch vibrator out of his hat and blew Batman. Then he ran out of rubbers and he ran away, because Optimus Prime came on Batman's face. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality. Good guys and bad guys with dildos, as far as the eye can see. There's quite a lot of fellatio and much sodomy. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality. Godzilla took a shit on Optimus Prime like Scruff McGruff, shit all over crime, and then Shaq came back covered in Godzilla's step. Then Jackie Chan jacked off and nutted on his back, and Batman was stressing, trying to get money, so he thought of an armadillo named Cory, but suddenly somebody caught his eye and he licked Indiana Jones' 13-inch dick. Then he took Godzilla from behind, reached around for his cock, which he just couldn't find. Then Batman squirted and he shot and he missed, penetrated Jackie Chan with his fist. Then he jumped in the air and he gave a peace sign as Abraham Lincoln tried to 69 with Optimus Prime, and they both got some, and they all got showered in Care Bear cum. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality. Good guys and bad guys with dildos, as far as the eye can see. It's gayer than Brokeback Mountain, I think you would agree. This is the ultimate orgy. Cue porno music, a funky jive chorus. Down from the heavens came naked Chuck Norris, who discovered a dick as hard as bones, attached to the crotch of Indiana Jones. He bent over on the ground, smiling with glee, as Batman changed into Ron Jeremy. just saw through this clever disguise and buried Batman's face in between his thighs. Then Gandalf the pimp and Gandalf the hoe, Matt Damon and the guys from Mr. Show, and Benito Mussolini and his big beanie, and Tony Curtis in a pink bikini, Robocop the Terminator, William Shatner, Ralph Nader, Lopan, Peter Pan, every male Power Ranger, Keanu Reeves and Bill S. Preston, Spock the Rock and Charles and Heston came out of nowhere, landing fast, and they all fucked Norse, and his cowboy ass was the greatest bukkake that the world ever saw, making Japanese men stare in total awe. 6 men on through 6 trillion, many cocks were sucked, but eventually a champion stood. All the girls got wetter, Mr. Rogers in a Cumsteen sweater. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality. Hot chicks and bad girls with strap-ons. As far as the eye can see, tits and vaginas incoming all continuously. This is the ultimate orgy. Big lesbian. This is the ultimate orgy. I think I'll drink off again. This is the ultimate orgy. Homosexuality.
So this is interesting. So why do some of these sites like Rule 34 exists? Well, it is mainly a niche culture, and it's always for sexuality. Sometimes it's to be edgy, and sometimes it's for things like spiritual bypassing and negative feelings. So spiritual bypassing is an interesting term. But spiritual bypassing is kind of like when there's a material element into our mind, and the way I like to think of it is that we use like poetry and expressive phrases to kind of like give our mind make things more significant for us. So for example, when you say there's a few road bumps in my day, that is an interesting that actually sometimes helps people, and sometimes rap music is good. So basically, in my opinion, one of the reasons spiritual bypassing works is that when you compare your experience, like I've had a terrible day today, and then I start thinking about Eminem, like, oh, am I a Slim Shady because I did something shady? That actually, because the song is made by someone else, from a narcissistic point of view, people have different levels of narcissism. If you have low self-esteem, when someone else gives you that same advice rather than you giving it to yourself, your brain is more likely to follow that. And also, it tricks your brain into thinking that it is an external object. And that also, I think, means that it processes things differently. I have a theory that it processes things differently. And that is that is what I think spiritual bypassing can also be used to get rid of negative feelings. Also, money is there. Artists need money, and sometimes sexual things are one of the best ways to make money, and they need to survive. And also, sometimes it isn't always a bad thing, because sometimes, sexuality can vary, and also sometimes it tests the limits of like current software, and things like that is one good way to test the limits of software. Because when people had to draw like nudity in like Rule 34, they needed to match the skin color, various things, and that tested the limits of the software in terms of being able to match like skin color of varying shades, I think. But this, in my opinion, there's a last bit in that video which highlights the way which people thought about, the millennial generation thought about sexuality. So even though there's many adult people in there, the Care Bears are mentioned. Now, many millennials will probably watch Batman when they're in primary school or secondary school, but the Care Bears are mentioned. The Care Bears is obviously a primary school level cartoon, early cartoon. And this is part of the millennial culture. It seems that for newer generations, the cartoons they watch follow their minds into adulthood, and they use these cartoons as a frame of reference. That is one theory that I think is true, because I don't know if people are true, but online, like, you can find meme videos about things like Rick and Morty is a bit of a cartoonish thing. I don't know if anyone has ever seen the channel Attention Deficit Hyperactivity. I'm not talking about the learning disability, but there's an actual YouTube channel, I've forgotten what it is, online, which has a song called Childhood Ruined, which literally is a song about how all the bands, how no one is perfect, and how all the creators of our primary school TV shows aren't as good as they say they were.
残酷な天使のように少年よ神話になれ青い風が今胸のドアを叩いても私だけをただ見つめて微笑んでるあなたそっと触れるもの求めることに夢中で運命さえまだ知らない痛いけな瞳だけどいつか気づくでしょうその背中には
So this is my presentation slide on why I think the niche culture theory that these things arose because our generation were very creative and they were like if something needed to be explored, sometimes our generation would explore it. Like if you go onto like websites like E621, there's tags on anything, there's sexual acts that don't even theoretically plausibly exist. So there are a couple that don't exist, like clit chandelier. I've never seen a tag of someone hanging from their clit on Real Date or anything like that. But our generation was really weird, and it was really weird. So this video memes during when I went on YouTube, when YouTube was early, our generation grew up with YouTube, with things like Chocolate Rain and various other things. But this, in my opinion, this video is proof that our generation was really creative just to prove a point. So here is the video that I think is proof. So this is a video of an anime remixed with Adolf Hitler, and it doesn't make much sense, but it doesn't mean that all millennials are neo-Nazis. So not all millennials are porn addicts or pedophiles, but it is really weird. As you can see, this is a popular intro. So as you can see, that video doesn't make much sense, but it was really creative. Obviously, like, creative things have come, think about it, obviously creative things have come back for a while, been in there for a while now, but back then this was considered a high-end creative endeavor. You would need a high-end, like, computer to make something like this, in some cases. Sorry. Okay, so this is interesting because I actually think that one of the sites actually proves this. So there's a phrase which was used to market Rule 34. It wasn't really marketing. I don't know if it was actually millennials or the term arose spontaneously, but Rule 34 has a saying. When I was in year 7, for example, which so early secondary school, straight after primary school, there was a saying for the Rule 34 community, which is that if it exists, there is porn of it. So if you can think of anything, there is porn of it, which is more of a shocking phrase, but also a challenge. So I wonder if some millennials took this as a challenge and made a lot of things of it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is what it is. So this is proof, in my opinion, that for many millennials, porn might have been an outlet, or maybe this kind of art was an outlet. Just because someone draws the art doesn't mean that they masturbate to it. And I'm wondering how it was between female artists and male artists. So this is another thing. So Rule 34 is one of the most well-known porn sites online, and it's probably censored a bit now. And it's interesting because there's all sorts of things. People are interesting. People have fetishes, and it is interesting from a free speech point of view because our generation, the millennials, are interested in free speech. So the Trump election is an example. I'm not going to say which side I supported, but when you remember things like Free Kekistan and Big Man Tyrone and the Centipede and like Greatest Crack Ball Never Sold, you know, it matters to the millennial generation. So there we go. And there's other rules as well, apparently. I only ever heard of Rule 34, but apparently there's also Rule 36 and Rule 63. So it seems that the generations exposed to the media seems to have a tendency to, I wonder if it was the nature of the internet or the way it was nature was made, or whether subsequent generations like Gen Zs or Gen Ys after the millennials have this way. But it seems that they followed the cartoons into their childhood. Sorry, into adulthood. So, and a big example of this is that many millennial men, 4chan might know about this, watch My Little Pony. I also did this, and many millennial men also made porn of My Little Pony characters. So everyone knows it. It is a girl show, and I'm really sorry about this, but I also masturbated to My Little Pony characters. Please don't ban me. This is really important that this is on there. So if anyone's listening, please don't be a troll. This is really important. This kind of video is on there so that there's free speech and that there things can be done properly, and that the problem of pornography addiction without censoring people can be attributed, because this is something that's hard to talk about. So, and if you want the proof, there is some of the Fabulous 5 or whatever it is. Spike the Dragon is gone. There was the Rainbow Dash, there was the Applejack, there was the Fluttershy, there was Twilight Sparkle, there was the Rarity, and then Veracity, her sister, the Cutie Pie Crusaders, and then there was this one, which is the Pinkie Pie, of which there's creepypastas, the cupcake thing. Do not look that up. Do not look that up. And survey says this is the example of some of the things. So this is the minor level stuff that I'm willing to put in on this BitChute presentation. BitChute, this presentation is originally going on BitChute because YouTube is probably not going to do it, and BitChute is known and associated with right-wing things, but it is also a free speech thing, and I would recommend, in my opinion, supporting it, or because we need these bastions of free speech sometimes. So these are from example things. So there's Rainbow Dash dodging you. The clopping was the term that you used. And when My Little Pony was memeing, there's videos like online of like cringe tubes of like children telling their parents that they watch My Little Pony, and there's like traditional fathers like being really disappointed, which is interesting. But it is a primary school girls cartoon, in my opinion. But it's interesting because sometimes it's different. Because, okay, regardless of what you think about like men doing girls things, sometimes it is interesting. So, for example, for anyone that knows about the millennials, so our generation watched Yu-Gi-Oh! If you were a boy, and Seto Kaiba, and Yu-Gi-Oh! The Bridge series with Little Karibo, Wing Karibo, and all of that stuff. But the woman and the girls in the program probably watch Bratz. So it is interesting because sometimes I've watched Bratz season 1 and it has actually improved my emotional intelligence. Why do I think this? Because, okay, be serious on this, but when it comes to certain cartoons, I actually think that some female cartoons, improve their emotional intelligence to an extent that men's cartoons don't. And it is important because the cartoons you watch sometimes do actually influence you, although it is a censorship thing sometimes. But for example, if anyone has, millennial men who's out there, or any man, Bratz season 1 is on YouTube, and basically you can watch it for free. And it's interesting because when you watch Yu-Gi-Oh, most of the, especially the original Yu-Gi-Oh, everything is centered around moral philosophy, like you lost because you didn't trust in the heart of your cards, you lost because you didn't treat people with respect, and you should be civil to people. But if you watch something like Bratz season 1, maybe not Barbie, I've never actually seen Barbie, the plot of the first season is that there is a guy, the main characters end up, the main characters work in a fashion magazine where there is nepotism, where there's twins, and there's also evil, an evil worker, not an evil lady who owns the magazine, but a really evil lady to work for. And that is interesting because I wonder if, because men seem to struggle in the workplace, especially nowadays compared to women, and I wonder if cartoons like that are part of the reason why women sometimes has more emotional intelligence. And I'm not saying that women should be forced to watch female cartoons, but I wondered if there's any male cartoons like that. Maybe there are. Maybe I'm not a huge cartoon fan. Maybe there are a few that are like that. But it's interesting because, on the other hand, when you look at something like My Little Pony, one could argue that that same defect applies because it is a good show. But think about it: every single episode, Twilight Sparkle has to learn something from Princess Celestia. Every lesson, but sometimes there isn't a lesson to be learned in life. You just get the paycheck and you hope things get better and you hope society improves, which I like to think it is. Okay, so a bit more about some of the sites for someone who doesn't know. So these are a few more of some of the extreme ones. The one here is definitely a bit of an extreme one in the bottom right hand corner. So E621, what is E621? E621 is a Boro style board, which you can look that up online for yourself if you want, but it is a mature image board replacement for the image board sidechain. A general audience board complements this. So it is an image style board where you can upload pornographic images and they have various tags. So yes, when I was young and under the age of 18, I used to masturbate to these kind of things. And I'm saying that because there isn't much talk on this online and I think that is important. But I think a lot of people did and it isn't such a big deal. Okay, so to think about, let's introduce Newsgrounds. Newsgrounds was it still exists, but Newsgrounds was where Flash animation exists. So before YouTube videos, there was Flash animations, and a lot of things existed in Newsgrounds. From anything from not safe for work porn videos to a variety of things. A lot of things. There's a lot of talented artists on there.
Old Godzilla was fucking around Tokyo City like a big playground when suddenly Batman jizzed from the shade and hit Godzilla with a bat-cum spray. Godzilla got laid and began to fuck back, but didn't expect to be fucked by Shaq, who proceeded to open up a can of Shaq lube when Aaron Carter came out of the blue, and he started sucking off Shaquille O'Neal in the backseat of the Batmobile. Before they could make it back to Aaron's love shack, Abraham Lincoln teabagged his sack, took a 9-inch vibrator out of his hat and blew Batman. Then he ran out of rubbers and he ran away because Optimus Prime came on Batman's face. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality. Good guys and bad guys with dildos. As far as the eye can see, there's quite a lot of fellatio and much sodomy. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality. Godzilla took a shit on Optimus Prime like Scruff McGruff, shit all over crime. And then Shaq came back covered in Godzilla scat. Then Jackie Chan jacked off and nutted on his back. And Batman was flaccid and trying to get horny, so he thought of an armadillo named Corey. But suddenly something caught his eye and he licked Indiana Jones' 13-inch dick. Then he took Godzilla from behind, reached around for his cock, which he just couldn't find. Then Batman squirted and he shot and he missed, and penetrated Jackie Chan with his fist. Then he jumped in the air and he gave the peace sign as Abraham Lincoln tried to 69 with Optimus Prime, and they both got some. Then they all got showered in Care Bear cum. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality. Good guys and bad guys with dildos. As far as the eye can see, it's gayer than Brokeback Mountain. I think you would agree. This is the ultimate orgy. Cue porno music, a funky jive chorus. Down from the heavens came naked Chuck Norris, who discovered a dick as hard as bones, attached to the crotch of Indiana Jones. He bent over on the ground, smiling with glee, as Batman changed into Ron Jeremy. But Chuck saw through this clever disguise and buried Batman's face in between his thighs. Then Gandalf the pimp and Gandalf the hoe, Matt Damon and the guys from Mr. Show, and Benito Mussolini and his big weenie, and Tony Curtis in a pink bikini, Robocop the Terminator, William Shatner, Ralph Nader, Lopan, Peter Pan, every male Power Ranger, Keanu Reeves and Bill S. Preston, Spock the Rock and Charlton Heston. Came out of nowhere lightning fast and they all fucked Norris, and his cowboy ass was the greatest bukkake that the world ever saw, making Japanese men stare in total awe. Sex went on for a century, many cocks were sucked, but eventually a champion stood, all the girls got wetter, Mr. Rogers in a cum-stained sweater. This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality, hot chicks and bad girls with strap-ons. As far as the eye can see, tits and vaginas and coming all continuously. This is the ultimate orgy.
Big lesbian orgy.
This is the ultimate orgy.
I think I'll jerk off again.
This is the ultimate orgy of homosexuality.
So this is another slide talking about the extent to which our millennial generation explored everything. We even had rap battles and everything. We had like songs like Double Rainbow and an obsession with Mr. Rogers. So Mr. Rogers is, I think, is from a primary school cartoon, and apparently Mr. Rogers, in addition to appearing in the greatest orgy of homosexuality in Newsgrounds, beats Mr. T, who has appeared in World of Warcraft and Mohawk Grenade. Okay, so this is an interesting video which highlights this is an interesting video which highlights what I think millennials, like a lot of their entire culture for many millennials were on the internet. Maybe not all of them, because I imagine that if you were a Muslim, maybe like this kind of thing would be haram to you, but for many millennials that just had free roam, or their parents gave them free roam sometimes, this is what they're exposed to. But our generation also had rap videos on things, and this is the thing. So Mr. Rogers is, I think, is a CBS program given in primary school that even some boomers know about, and it was given. And when I say free roam, because our generation was one of the few exposed to the internet, many boomers, even though many or millennials' parents would be strict, they wouldn't know about how people might evade it. So, for example, many internet filters or porn blockers are easily available nowadays if you use a proxy, or if you like glitch out using like safe mode or something like that. And handhelds like the PlayStation Portable were an easy way to access pornography. Some people bought their child a PlayStation Portable, a Sony handheld PSP earlier on, and without even meaning to, the child accidentally accessed pornography. I remember doing this myself, and I was addicted to the pornography to the point, cartoon pornography, to the point that I would actually like hide it under the bed, and then my dad would be like, "Are you awake?" And then I'd be like pretending to sleep. It is the genuine truth. So that is an interesting one. I wouldn't say that would mean that I should never have bought one, but looking back, that was a mistake I made, and I'm wondering what the influence of this. It would be interesting to know if this was the case for other millennials. So just to reiterate the point, so Mr. Rogers is a recurring theme. So this proves that it's not always pornography or sexuality. Sometimes it doesn't need to do it. Or sometimes I wonder if people grow up. So a girl grows up and then feels emotional feelings or a boy for a character. I'm sorry, but I don't know. I'm not going to comment on this, but it's an interesting idea. But so what I'm going to say in this slide is that Mr. Rogers is a recurring theme in some elements of the millennial generations of like fan culture, or like the cultural wars. And this is interesting. So one theory, it could be, this is a very cliche theory, I don't know how true this is, but one theory is that sometimes the outside world is so harsh that role models or heroes we wish existed in the real world only exist in fantasy and cartoons. This is also a reoccurring theme in biblical text. So for example, in Abrahamic theologies, the Ark of the Covenant is built to remind people that God's presence still existed, because sometimes the world was so harsh that it seemed not to be the case. And it is interesting because on the other side of the coin, we have like Joseph's multicolored Technicolor theme coat, which is about like creativity in some cases. So, and that is, I think, a school play in some cases.
Animal, murder, hand face to stomp you out. The only pussycat you ever seen is on Henrietta. Sucker, and your Mr. McFeely delivers a lot more than letters. So before you come to battle with your PBS crap, how about I call up CPS about them kids on your lap, fool?
Watch what you say. Kids love me more than lunch. I'm not the one with my face on some whack-ass Captain Crunch. When my plan comes together, you won't even see it coming. I'll chop you into 4 black dudes and I'll remake Cool Runnings. I'll say this once, Lawrence, I hope it's understood. Get right back in your van, get the fuck out of my neighborhood.
Hold war! Holster! Use hard!
So I don't know whether the millennial generation has an unhealthy obsession with Mr. Rogers, but there's this to listen to.
Animal, murder, hand face to stomp you out. The only pussycat you ever seen is on Henrietta. Sugar, and your Mr. McFeely delivers a lot more than letters. So before you come to battle with your PBS crap, how about I call up CPS about them kids on your lap, fool?
Watch what you say. Kids love me more than lunch. I'm not the one with my face on some whack-ass Captain Crunch. When my plan comes together, you won't even see it coming. I'll chop you into 4 black dudes and I'll remake Cool Runnings. I'll say this once, Lawrence, I hope it's understood. Get right back in your van, get the fuck out of my neighborhood.
Hold war! Holster! Use hard! Animal, murder, hand face to stomp you out. The only pussycat you ever seen is on Henrietta. Sugar, and your Mr. McFeely delivers a lot more than letters. So before you come to battle with your PBS crap, how about I call up CPS about them kids on your lap, fool?
Watch what you say. Kids love me more than lunch. I'm not the one with my face on some whack-ass Captain Crunch. When my plan comes together, you won't even see it coming. I'll chop you into 4 black dudes and I'll remake Cool Runnings. I'll say this once, Lawrence, I hope it's understood. Get right back in your van, get the fuck out of my neighborhood.
Hold war! Holster! Use hard!
Now, this is another one. This is an interesting one, and this depends partially on the law in the country you are on. So I'm not sure about the states, but I think that some states are stricter than others. But in the early video game industry was funded in part, as far from my research, from pornography or other industries that were also kicking off at the time. That I'm not making a judgment on those industries. I think those industries deserve to live. Like the pornography industry is a vital one and sometimes a free speech haven. But to what extent did the early video game industry contribute to potential pornography addiction? So that is an interesting idea, because back then, because technology was like, people were getting all these delays and technology was lifting up off the ground, people weren't sure how to monitor things. So for example, I'm going to talk about this later, but in the UK, the laws were not that strict early onwards, although they are now. And the initial publishing of PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 magazines sometimes had like sexy adverts for like sexy hotlines that children could buy, unsuspecting mothers could buy. And if you go online, those adverts aren't in them anymore, because they have like reauthored versions of these old old magazines. But for anyone who has them in the garage or something, in the UK, they had like porn adverts where you could text 150 to get like a naked picture of a babe, and they actually showed you some of these pictures in the actual magazine a child could buy. This in Australia it was far stricter and it wasn't the case, but in the UK I think that many children were exposed to pornography through this method. But moving back on, I don't know what, I wouldn't call these previous websites gatekeepers, but I wonder if, but obviously they are there, but I wonder if they did not exist, I actually think the world would be a worse place. I think that they need to exist, but it's interesting to think about it. But they're policed somehow, but I don't know how that exists, how that is done. But I think that if they were banned or something, that would cause an uproar, and they'll just get made anyway, because people like to express themselves sometimes. And as previously mentioned, that is multiple reasons for their existence, ranging from pornography and the need for desire for it, or need to do it, or maybe spiritual bypassing or mental illness. So I'm not sorry, skip the mental illness thing, but negative feelings, or a need to feel loved or something. That is an interesting idea, because it is interesting. So from a pornography addiction point of view, I was quite addicted to pornography myself, but you can masturbate for hours. I'm warning you, some men masturbate for 10 hours, 10, 20 hours a day. One time in my life, I was masturbating for 20 times a day. And it got to the point where I was so bad that being without porn made me feel physical pain. And sometimes normal porn didn't cut it. It had to be of a specific character or a video game. And that was from childhood. And I actually would hope that a new comic would come out, or a new porn comic, or a new image would come out. So sometimes, like, it is interesting to think about. So if these bans, so there are already porn addicted people, but if these things were to be banned tomorrow, in that specific context, these sites are a form of palliative care for such people, because for some people, it is the truth. Like, many porn addicted people come from very weird circumstances, and they sometimes don't get the help they need, or sometimes, you know, there's criminal gangs in some mental health systems that some people are afraid sometimes. You know, some people don't go to certain homeless shelters sometimes because many homeless shelters have a a religious twist to them. And sometimes if you're not religious or you don't toe their line, sometimes they can be a bit negative towards you. So from that palliative care point of view, some men might be so porn addicted that they need this in order to survive. And I actually think it is the truth. It was the case for myself, so I imagine it was the case for my man. If you are attracted to a certain fictional character and you need that porn to be there, to not feel physical pain because your porn addiction is that bad, and you literally, like, if you sit there for 10 hours, you can literally, like, read all the porn on, like, Rule 34 in some cases for a certain character, and then you literally hope that by next week people have made more. So in that kind of instance, is kind of like a palliative care kind of thing, which is why I think these sites need to exist. And sometimes it is just creativity. So this is an interesting idea. So, as I previously mentioned, the early video game industry could be a source of porn addiction. So early on, I don't know. So nowadays you can go onto X videos, Pornhub, Dumbzilla, and access all the porn you want to a certain extent, as long as it isn't like illegal or something like that. But back then, porn was hard to come by, not until a certain point. So back then, you would have to pay £1.50 for one picture. Nowadays, you can see like entire movies for free on xvideos.com. But back then, it was difficult to get that much porn. So it is interesting. So I wonder if these sites like Rule34 made porn more freely available, and also benefited communities like, I don't know, other communities in some way or another. Like, for example, ages ago, it would be wrong for a woman to show a thigh, and things like Victoria's Secret or like sex toys would be like new. But nowadays, like some people that is normal, or if you own one, people don't necessarily judge you for it, and they're just like, okay, that's just him. Back in those days, but these early video games magazines sometimes advertised these, and a kid could pick these up and like get them, and sometimes their parent would buy them and they would look through them. So I'm going to talk a bit more about these later, but it is the genuine truth. And also, here's another thing. So in the UK, I'm from the United Kingdom, they had Freeview. So Freeview was what we had early on. I think they have FreeSat now, which is where like you had like satellite free. It's basically like free Sky TV, but less because it was free. I don't know if you have free cable in America. But back then there was a channel, I think it still exists now, but called Babe Station, where you could have like naked babes dancing around. So imagine like a sleep deprived child, and anyone can access this and accidentally go on it. And when I say anyone. So imagine that, I don't know, one day Timmy's like mum or dad doesn't come home, and Timmy has sleep deprived because his mum isn't there. And then he on the TV, and then he keeps flicking the channel because his cartoon has ended and there's no cartoons at night. And he goes on Babe Station UK and starts watching babes. That has happened to me as well. That is how Timmy becomes financially poor. Save Timmy. If we don't save Timmy, the world might come to an end. But on a serious note, there's a variety of like coincidental ways people can access pornography initially. So I don't know if you can live a life where you can not have access to it, but there is a certain level of explicit content where I think it is very hard. Children's minds, in my opinion, are very, very malleable, and sometimes they won't always know what they're doing to themselves, and sometimes there is a physiological limitation. So, for example, think about someone like fentanyl addiction, which I think that they use for. So in America, fentanyl is many times more addictive than some things like heroin, and I think it was inappropriately prescribed for certain things because it's very effective. And think about it, those people need methadone because without that, there is a physiology. Even though you have free will, and there is a willpower element to porn addiction. Sometimes they need that, I wonder. Because think about someone with Parkinson's. Someone with Parkinson's, they need dopamine increasing medication. So things like levodopa. So levodopa. I'm not a qualified medical doctor, but I know this from some reading. People with Parkinson's, they need medications that increase the dopamine in their brain because their basal ganglia is effed up, and they need things like levodopa, methyl-dopa, or things which indirectly increase medications that indirectly increase the number of dopamine. And this is relevant because dopamine is also affected in porn addiction. And what I find is that in some porn addicts, they are very clumsy. The basal ganglia is a very interconnected system, and I think that this is another reason why porn addiction is deadly. Because many men do manual labor jobs, and this can, in my opinion, I wonder if there is much research into how it affects their movement and things. Okay, so then, there are a variety of porn services nowadays, but like OnlyFans, Venmo, if you want to go there, there's Chatterbait, and there's all like live rooms. Now, this is a good idea. I don't use many of them. I don't use pornography that much anymore. But in the UK, there was an official PlayStation 2 magazine, and before that was a PlayStation 1 magazine where pornography was literally advertised. And I think that these pornography services funded these magazines early on. Nowadays, everyone knows about video games, some people buy video games just to do it. But here's a tip. So I think that there are a few ways that pornography could be tackled without necessarily harming the pornography industry, because at the end of the day, these things are there. In America, there's places where medical students, from what I've read, have funded themselves through pornography, and some people use Tinder like to deal with loneliness. It is the actual truth, in my opinion. Although maybe most people might not use them, but in my opinion, like things like online like webcams. So millennial generation might remember things like Melody, where like all the like cam girls raged because Melody became like the #1 like VR porn girl or something like that. But I wonder if people should have like body pillows on Chatterbait, like body pillow red room, like punch the red room, like, you know, like these Japanese body pillows you get, like punch the body pillow, or like chainsaw it in half and like donate to chainsaw it in half, or punch the body pillow. I don't know, like dancing body pillow. But many people who use pornography are very like introverted. So I wonder if so there's in the UK, I don't know if elsewhere I think in America they have things like Big Brother or Love Island. I think that they should do like an actual to promote inclusivity. I think they should do like an actual like challenge where people have to look after a body pillow and treat it as if there was a girlfriend. If they don't take it seriously, they get punished for it, or they have to do chores. But that's an interesting idea. I think that I have a body pillow myself, and I think that might be an interesting idea. That is just for fun. I wouldn't necessarily recommend getting one, but sometimes it can be helpful because you can be like, oh, I'm going home to so and so, and sometimes it just tricks your mind into thinking that you're not so alone. And that is an interesting idea, because if you go on Twitch, there's VR is a good one. There's literally men who are like dancing in female avatars, which is interesting. Not safe for ones, but female avatars. So that would be an interesting idea to promote inclusivity. I wonder if body pillow like Chatterbait channels or porn channels, like webcam channels, exist, and whether or not that kind of a challenge would be something that Love Island or Big Brother would use. I've never seen like an introverted version of Big Brother. That would be really, really, really weird, or it might just be really, really cringe. Instead, so there's various ways you can think about this. So obviously, like many like female video game characters are sexy. So if you look at the top right hand corner, there's Invasion from Beyond, and that is like there because it draws your attention very quickly. And I'm not talking about that level of stuff. That was like normal. Like even for like perfume adverts before video games existed, they would be like that, like designer brand adverts. But I'm talking like high on. Like you would like literally. If you look at the left of this slide, you would literally open a slide in some countries' video game magazines, and that'd be literally like a vagina staring your face, or like tits staring your face, and then like 5-year-old Timmy in primary school would start masturbating to it. I'm maybe not 5 years old, but the exposure can happen really early. Nowadays, things are better controlled. So I like to think personally that the generations after the millennials aren't as more likely to be porn addicted, although the internet is more developed, purely because things are better controlled and better monitored. You might say that's a bad thing, and that technology was new back then, so people didn't know how to control it in the first place, and it was more about the benefits these industries could provide. Without the video game industry, a lot of things would not exist. Think about the level of like the good that video games have happened. Without these pornographic institutions funding these early video games magazines, things like Steam might not even exist. So that is interesting to think about before like directly attacking the pornography industry. I think it has a right to exist, and it's interesting to think about, but this is one of the ways I personally became porn addicted. So I don't know, in the UK the laws were quite lax originally, so I don't know if it applied to the entire lifespan of the PlayStation 2 magazine. Okay, so this is going to prove a point here, but in the PlayStation 2, in the UK, and I think other countries, it differed as to what the advertising was, but in the UK, these pornographic adverts were allowed. So some parents like wanted to make their children happy and ended up buying a magazine with porn in it. And the PlayStation 2 official magazine was good because it came with a demo disc most of the time, with like actual demos of games. Sometimes it would be most of the actual game. When I say most of the actual game, so things like wrestling games, it would include like the actual game, but with like it would include most of the game with like limited characters and limited arenas. And here's another thing, like pro tip for millennial generations: millennials can find it very, very, very like easy to spend money sometimes. But I think that a lot of people, like, if you watch Angry Video Game Nerd, I don't know if many people like own that many video games. This is something that one of my friends like. But a lot of people just watch Let's Plays and they don't actually buy that many games. And most of the people I know don't necessarily own that many games. Although you can get a lot of games by things like Humble Bundle and things like that very cheaply if you want to look that up. So this is the meme in the millennials. Absolutely haram. So think about it. Right on there, Rumble Roses. So this is interesting. So I like to think that my parents didn't know that I was addicted to pornography, and there was a game in this particular demo disc. This came with a magazine. So I bought some of the issues of PlayStation 2 magazine when I was a child. My mum bought it for me, and they came with games that were like 18 plus or 16 plus. And I actually think they were quite explicit. They would like count as like softcore porn, in my opinion. And nowadays, I don't know whether these games would be allowed. So Rumble Roses was one of the games. So I was basically a primary school kid, and the demo disc came with various games on: Destroy All Humans, Mercenaries, and one of these games was Rumble Roses, which sparked my early fascination for adult women. So. And then it is interesting. So this game literally depicts people wrestling in mud and wrestling in poses, and they literally have camera shots and like people's pants and stuff like that. But if my mum and my dad had known this, I don't think they would have bought it for me. But I was scared because back then there was a social pressure to fit in, and people don't always necessarily. And think about it. So my parents were migrant parents, so. Migrant parents are more likely to be strict, potentially, because you don't want your child messing up in a new country, because the West is sometimes seen as a place where things are better, but at the same time there are a lot of things where you can waste money on. So that is and you could argue that's just a narrative, and even like working class people, like white people, Americans struggle. But listen, but if I had told my parents, they might have never bought me a PlayStation game again, and I would have literally been the odd one out in the playground. And that is sometimes hurtful for a child. So it's interesting to think about, but looking back, I wonder if I would never been porn addicted if it wasn't for some of these factors or circumstances. Such as randomly being able to flick through Babe Station while my parents were away or late at home from traffic at night, and some of these pornographic adverts in PlayStation magazines or gaming magazines that anyone could buy. You won't find them in gaming magazines nowadays, but if you look up these same magazines, they will be re-authored versions, so they won't include it. That isn't the industry trying to hide it. That is because to meet legal requirements, but it is a part of general game history. But at the same time, I think Rumble Roses is a good game, and it pushed the limits of what is considered acceptable. I don't want to go back to an era where bikinis are banned and women get like told off just for like showing a bit of thigh. I genuinely don't want that to happen. So Rumble Roses is a good game. And Candy Cane is my favourite childhood crush. And it's an awesome game. But it's basically a game where women can wrestle, and they wrestle in some of the weirdest ways possible. So have a look at the amount of ass in. Think about it. They're wrestling and they're literally shagging each other, and then they're literally like the camera is facing the ass. I'm sorry, that is a very painful position for a woman to hold. I would get slapped if a woman was ever asked by me to do that. I don't think many would. I'm sorry, even in like a porn movie, I've never seen these kind of poses, and I don't think that's always a bad thing. But I wonder if I should be playing something like this in primary school. I remember inviting people home and playing this with people, so I don't know whether I actually got other people addicted to porn, but it is what it is. So there was a character in here who's called Candy Cane, and backstories from these characters were really appealing and interesting. That was my favourite character. But it is interesting nowadays, like in comparison to like sexy video game characters, this game I think had some of the most explicit video game characters, without being an actual like explicit video game that was sexy, like Bone Town or something. I've never actually played that, but I heard that's an actual thing with an actual like playthrough. But nowadays characters, most of them are very clothed. Okay, and this is another point. So in this video game, which was known as Rumble Roses, I didn't own the game, I owned the demo disc. There's actual game moves where if you do enough damage, you can do like a humiliation move, killer move, or lethal move. And they start shagging each other. And there's even a mud wrestling mode where they literally look like they literally are covered in mud. And I'm sorry, they might as well be shagging each other, but think about it, a humiliation move. The humiliation move was like a special move you could do. And these like special moves were literally designed to be as sexy and appealing as possible, like showing their like ass. There's an actual character in the video game called Candy Cane where she actually shows her ass to people, and she shags people. It's not even an actual joke. It was a good game and I really enjoyed playing it, and it did keep me sane when I was stressed. But I actually wonder whether or not, as a child, I should be playing this, and whether most parents would buy this kind of thing for them. Okay, so now next slide. So these things are actually very difficult for a kid to resist. So think about it. If you're a kid, so I remember reading that magazine with Rumble Roses and Playboy Mansion in it, and it literally had a girl literally like saying scratch and sniff on it, like scratch your butthole, sniff your ass. So, you know, I was in it for the Destroy All Humans. And Mercenaries is a great game. I only ever played the demo, but it's very difficult for a kid to resist. Kids can oftentimes get confused and resist these things. I'm not saying that sexuality is bad. Like, think about it. Like, nowadays, a bikini, like, even though pornography addiction is interesting, not many people would disagree that a bikini many people would say that a bikini there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like something there. Like, I don't want to go back to the days when bikinis don't exist, personally. So it's an interesting issue, but from this point of view, like, it's difficult for kids to resist. Like, Rumble Roses is a heck of a game. Like, think about it. There's actually like scenes in there where like the camera is deliberately has them like wrestling with zoomed in on their underwear. So some children may not have told their parents. But there are a few problems. So not every kid tells their parents because they don't want their PlayStation taken away forever, because many of their parents would be horrified. And I didn't tell my own parents. So this kind of thing is confusing, and many children get sexually attracted or conflicted during puberty. And many children also sometimes get confused because they want to please women, and sometimes they get confused regarding that. Well, that's a separate thing, whether or not heroism should be the predominant theme of male childhood cartoons and movies. So there's a variety of sites as well that children can go on, and especially the millennial generation access without much hindrance, which is things like Rule 34 and E61, and I think that those sites are useful as well and should exist. And you should always be careful. Never judge a man by his internet browsing history is an interesting one. And nowadays it's also interesting because nowadays we have artificial intelligence, but I don't really have that much time necessarily. But I'm wondering how. So in my generation, certain pornographic pieces of art or even like normal art would cost £200-300, because when you pay an artist, you don't necessarily pay them for their for the art. You pay them for the experience that it took them to get that good. But nowadays with AI, I'm wondering how whether Gen Z and Gen Y, so that is the emergence of artificial intelligence that can even make pictures for cheap, like Night Cafe and things, is something that's just something I read briefly somewhere else. It's something that the millennial generation was never exposed to. Artificial intelligence that could create images, and even pornographic images wasn't something that the millennial generation had access to, but Gen Y and Gen Z does. So I'm wondering what the effect on that will be. I have well, I know cousins and stuff who are Gen Y, Gen Z, so I'm wondering whether that has an impact on them, but who knows. I'm not their parent. And this is just something to show you the level of detail that goes into thinking about sexuality in video games. So in video games, they often have Tanner staging. So for example, some porn producers, for anyone that's studied anatomy and development, the Tanner stages of development are how puberty goes, and there's a male version, and I think there's also a female version. So this is the female version, and it shows how a girl goes through puberty. And there's different stages that happens as the estrogen and all the different hormones act. So people say estrogen, but there's actually different forms of estrogen in the body, like estrone, estradiol, estrogen, and things like that. But it is interesting because so from a child pornography perspective, and whether this is used to determine whether or not something is child pornography sometimes. And this is interesting because child pornography, does actually appear in some films, as in big Bollywood films. A Serbian film, there's actually a movie in that film that is a controversial film that was, I think, in a film festival at one point. That there was an actual scene called newborn porn where a guy fucks a baby after a mother gives birth to it. And basically it was controversial because they said of the film producer, everyone else is making decent films, and this guy is making these films, and that wasn't made for the purpose of child pornography. That was made for the purpose of these are some of the best examples to find, and I think these are most readily relatable. That was made for the purpose of having a shock factor, but this is also relevant because some pornographic female actors, from what I've read, are, because of their body stature, they might be 4 foot or 5 foot, and sometimes they might not also develop well. So for example, some women, they don't have all the stages of development, and they look quite young even though they're over the age of 18, but because of the Tanner stages of sexual development, they might not necessarily be allowed a job in the porn industry because they look like children even though they're not children. And sometimes it's not that porn actors are I don't think that porn film producers are deliberately seeking out such actors, to form pseudo child porn, but sometimes such women are denied this ability, or they have to find a way around it and meet these Tanner stage criteria. But this might sound like a simple and cut case, but a lot of stuff goes into what films are available, should be available, what films should be made, and if you're not convinced, and there's a few slides later on. So what are these examples? So how do you extend this law? Well, I don't know if anyone in the millennial generation has ever heard of shipping. Oh man, the meme with teenage girls shipping. Oh, they'll be adults now, but Bella from Twilight, and it's Bella, and it's Edward, what's his Edward from Twilight, and he's shining, and it's Bella, you are the only one for me, So, Avatar: The Last Airbender shipping. I'm sorry, many men shipped as well. Back when I was alive, you could type in Simpson, Bart Simpson, and they were shipping, and there'd be erotic stories about that. And some of them were actually made by actual teenagers. So, are these people paedophiles if they haven't drawn art? And I'm sorry that there is actually a fandom wiki especially donated to shipping and stuff. So not all shippings. A lot of shippings aren't pornographic or sexual in their content, but they're more I flirted or I blew him a kiss or something like that. It's more about the emotions and the drama sometimes. So that is interesting. But what counts and what should not count? And I'm just trying to give people a broad overview of the issue rather than taking a side. But I think that children should be protected. That's just my own issue. So shipping is usually just text, but is it legal? Is it not legal? So it is interesting because I actually imagine that many millennials might be addicted to things like cartoon pornography, and sometimes when you fail to get out of childhood or a childhood-like mindset, you still masturbate to cartoon pornography. I'm sorry, I've masturbated to pictures of Lisa Simpson. Okay, not always as an adult. And I started that when I was in primary school, and I did that out of habit. And then the law changed later on, I think, in various places where that became illegal. But when I started and did it out of habit, it was illegal. But it is an interesting idea, but there needs to be context, because at the same time, because it was definitely out of habit, because at the same time I was masturbating to things on like X videos, and there was a point where I'd literally finished every single video in a certain category on X video, because that's how much free time I had. Like, whoa. But it is interesting, so think about it. Like, it's mainly because I was just looking for novelty all the time. So think about it very carefully. So think about fan service and anime. So if anyone's not an anime fan service is where like you have like sexy pictures in anime, not like hentai, which is deliberate anime made sexual, but anime. But should it be? Is anyone that makes fan service? So look at stuff like Konosuba, where like sometimes they have like sexual innuendos. Should that count? Should that not count? That's important to think about. Okay, so this is an interesting idea. So this is an example of some of the cartoon porn. So it is the actual truth. So in the left-hand side, this is an example of the shipping wiki, which has various examples of shipping. I don't think they're mainly sexual, but the other websites are mainly sexual. And then there's literally like love triangles. It was so popular, there was even like shipping guides for cartoons that millennials probably were very familiar with. So for example, for the millennium generation, Avatar: The Last Airbender was what many millennials loved. And that's an example of like softcore Katara pornography. Katara being one of the Avatar Aang's like companions. Okay, so this is interesting. Another thing, so the Avatar: Last Airbender is an amazing cartoon, and then but here's something else. So the original, like the movie, there was like a real-time movie that was made, and the movie is terrible. The Avatar movie, there was a live-action movie, and it is terrible. The earthbending is terrible. Like, people have to dance. In the actual anime, people have to like punch, like can like rip open a continent, at the very maximum, or like throw a boulder with ease. But here, like 5-10 people have to dance to like flick a pebble like at someone. But you might as well like pick up a rock and throw the rock. Like, what? Just pick up the rock and throw the rock. Like, earthbending is terrible in this movie, and the movie was a complete letdown. Okay, so another thing. So there's another thing about these people should keep it to themselves. Well, I think that the existence of this community shows that people can't keep it to themselves, because people want to share it with other people. There's various theories. For some people it might be is this normal kind of approach, but some people generally want to share it with other people, and some of these communities, maybe they can be good. So why am I segueing into some of these discussions? So I just want to get a few things clear. So I am not a paedophile or anything like that, but I think that these topics need to be discussed, as in things like cartoon porn. Like Rule 34 is not does not have anything to do with paedophilia as such, but when it originally started, there was a lot of like cartoon porn, like Bart Simpson's porn, there was even like Animaniacs porn and stuff like that. And it's interesting to think about, because these things might exist regardless of what we do, but I can't really put such a big issue into one slide. But I think that some elements of it have to be discussed. At the very least, the potential consequences of use could be discussed. So, for example, porn is always going to exist. Porn in general is always going to exist, but for some people, the addiction ruins their lives. And I'd have to say, in this regard, as a South Asian minority, when I was in primary school, it was my only release, and it kept me sane. So in a way, I'm glad it existed. But there's a few various things in the like drawn porn community, things like lolicon, toddlercon, and other forms of art, and it's interesting to think about whether the legality of these issues. And I don't know much about this, but I'm mentioning them because I'm trying to like maintain the scope of this presentation, and you might have different opinions, but I'm wondering like how far the actual conversation goes, because think about it, like lolicon is like porn of like kids or something, and then like some people are saying like, yeah, but in the manga she's like 5,000 years old, and it's like, so it's not lolicon, and you're like, so like what are the dimensions or facets on which it can be considered? Also, if the law only applies to aliens, would a picture of a alien child that didn't have human skin and had like 4 arms count? So from an actual legalistic point of view, you have to consider this. Or for example, what about like stickman porn? Like if someone drew like a child stickman being fucked, like in theory it is a stickman because it has no flesh or anything, but like in a courtroom, like could they be like, this is only a stickman, it's only like a few electrons of graphite, it is clearly not like a drawn human body. But it's interesting to think about, and I think that regardless of what is going to happen, I think that is important to raise some awareness on this. So why am I segueing into discussions like this? Well, I'm trying to give viewers an idea of the various issues regarding pornography. So generally, I wanted to talk about pornography as a whole and how it can be, and its effect on society. Now, I generally think that the pornography industry might be a good thing overall, and that there needs to be a way of tackling pornography addiction that doesn't threaten the pornography industry, because some of these industries like originally started because like in my opinion, persecution and stuff like that, because people had to go to those industries because of that, and also it is one of the world's oldest professions for a reason, but like, or that might be like prostitution or something, but I think that it should exist, but there needs to be a way of tackling pornography addiction without threatening pornography industry and the livelihoods of the careers of these people. But I'm trying to give viewers an idea of the different issues, because there's not more, addiction is one of them, and there's also things like the type of content and stuff. So children, my idea is that it is wrong, but I'm not talking about that. That to me is an absolute, but things like this it's interesting. So I'm not talking about directly, but for example, some children unfortunately become very sexually aware earlier on. Children are, for example, undergoing puberty earlier, and sometimes a child, obviously, when they get, for example, when I was like 9 years old, I learned to change my own underwear, and if I drew someone, like I actually like to draw things in my free time, and I was not an amazing artist, but I drew things from the reference of a child. So anyone that I drew would always look like a child, because think about it, I'm like, oh, I'm drawing a body, what should I draw? So would a child be doing this? Be interesting. In my opinion, a child should not be uploading pornography, but these kinds of contexts can actually arise sometimes. So there needs to be some debate over it. Another thing is, are lolicon artists, are they all paedophiles, and what should count? And it is interesting because sometimes think about anime where you have like really youngish characters and you have fan service. It isn't always deliberate, but sometimes it is like an innuendo rather than this shouldn't be happening, like a cheeky monkey kind of thing. But these debates are important, and it's important that people respect each other, and because in the past, when people have talked about these issues, people were labelled as schizophrenic, or potentially labelled as a psychopath, or labelled as something else, or a NPD, or a narcissistic person, or something like that. And the basis of a democratic society is like having a fair debate, not necessarily debating each other, but having at least the content being debated online. And that is one of the good things about the internet, is that you can get like free lectures, free education online, and this is another important thing. Who knows, maybe someone will watch this video and be a bit more informed about the dangers of pornography and the issues. This is something I want to stress. So it is interesting. So people viewing cartoon pornography, like pornography of like Bart Simpson or Lisa Simpson, are they paedophiles? Because many of them would never ever harm a child. So I am interested in this because For example, homosexuality, that is an interesting thing, but some people, for example, have sex with men in the real world, but look at female pornography. So maybe that is an example of that. I'm not really sure about that, but many paedophiles might not necessarily harm a child, and they might necessarily be willing to undergo voluntary sterilisation in order to do that. So I think I'm discussing this because I think that in terms of the most definitive issue that is a complete no in the pornography community, I think that this is one of them. The idea of children being harmed, children need to be protected 100%. But in this regard, so I'm going to talk about seeking help for pornography and addiction. So paedophiles seeking help from the mental health industry, that is an interesting idea, because unfortunately society, even in the first world, even in countries like the United States or the United Kingdom or like Canada, are struggle, and sometimes people have their own views. Sometimes people think, why is he complaining, that's a spoiled child or something like that. And criminal gangs unfortunately sometimes infiltrate the mental health systems, and I don't know if people know this, but in America sometimes homeless people, and in other parts of the world, sometimes homeless people avoid religious food shelters when they're homeless because they're run by religious organizations which can be a bit cultish, and sometimes when you're like homeless, sometimes you might be mentally, you're not necessarily mentally ill as such, I think, but I remember reading somewhere that sometimes you can blow up at people easily, and sometimes many homeless people know that, and they don't want to risk like pissing or put the wrong person off. But it's interesting. So sometimes when you seek help in the mental health industry, you might actually risk being targeted by a gang. So if you're a paedophile, I think that to me it is a visceral reaction. The idea of a child being harmed is horrible. If you said that I think I'm a paedophile, or I want sterilisation, a person might still be burned alive by a paedophile gang or something like that. But so I'm not a paedophile, but that is an interesting idea. So should that kind of help for these people exist? And another thing, but in general, I would like to talk about generic like pornography. So I was watching like adult pornography, like on X videos from a young age, purely because like back then the internet was like memeing, and like people didn't know what form the internet could take also, so it was difficult to like affect the internet. And like there was even pornography in like TV, like Babe Station UK and stuff like that. So to my knowledge, there's a paedophilia. In my opinion, I wouldn't dislike the idea of someone harming a child sexually, but I genuinely think that there should be some sort of way that paedophiles can get help. Unfortunately, what it is harming a child will always produce a massive visceral response, even in a qualified psychiatrist, which is meant to have an unbiased opinion and discuss things with the patient in a non-controversial manner. When they use things like the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual 5, which is one of the books that are the guidelines for diagnosing things. But unfortunately, even in a first world country, the threat of a paedophile gang or someone blackmailing them, for example, if a paedophile who never harmed a child says, I want to be sterilised, it does that, like, they might be getting blackmailed even though they never harmed a child. So but in my opinion, that is actually brave, and they should ideally not necessarily get praise, but they shouldn't be burnt alive, and they should be allowed to get that help, or so they don't access this content, or at the very least they don't harm other children, because that is massive. Childhood only happens once, and that should never ever happen. And paedophile gangs, unfortunately, it is interesting because sometimes in corrupt, sometimes people, I know that people say don't take justice into your own hands, but when a child is harmed and and you think that the police aren't doing anything, that must really hurt to be a parent. So I'm not going to comment on that, but paedophiles that don't harm children should be able to get help. But in general, seeking help in the mental health industry for generic pornography addiction is difficult. So what I'm thinking is that in the future, maybe things like generic help medications will be utilized to help people with pornography addiction. I have this theory, for example, the one testosterone and things and sex hormones can often affect your sexual drive, but I have this theory, for example, the birth control pill. I'm not a scientist myself, but I wonder the birth control pill is still available even in third world countries. So I'm wondering if in the future it'll be possible for people to request the birth control pill in order to beat their pornography addiction, any pornography addiction, because it's estrogen or progesterone. It might actually affect their sex drive, and it is weird because from a legalistic point of view, as like a healthcare practitioner, a doctor, or a nurse practitioner, or something like that, because it's a steroid hormone, and estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, they're steroid hormones. So steroid hormones are type of hormones which can readily cross. The science is complicated, but they can affect your gene transcription and things like that, and they can cause system-wide effects. For example, which is why puberty, one of the reasons why puberty brings on such massive changes in the body. But I actually think that is difficult in the mental health industry because people will never, because very often sometimes doctors get sued and there is a lot that could go wrong in terms of side effects. But I actually think that some people with porn addiction are so affected by their porn addiction that they will be willing to like permanently lose the ability to have an erection or permanently becoming fertile. For that, for example, if in third world countries the birth control pill is available, would porn addicted men be willing to take the birth control pill, maybe for like a week? I don't know. To affect their porn addiction. That's interesting. In some cases, things like ADHD medication are used for porn addiction. I've heard maybe like the first few weeks are harder, but that is interesting because. One of the things I really like about the birth control solution, I don't know if it is possible, I think it could be plausible, is that if someone without ADHD was prescribed something like Ritalin or methylphenidate, which affect dopamine transmission in the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive function, in order to beat porn addiction, and they didn't have ADHD, then they would actually have to discuss with the doctor as to why they wanted it for a short period of time, and they would necessarily have to talk about their porn addiction. Now, most people with porn addiction some of them are very shame-filled. Most people watch legal pornography, and they won't necessarily discuss that. And I think it could be a reasonable idea, but in some cases, in some countries, even being addicted to normal adult pornography is a massive taboo. So that is an interesting idea, but I think that in the future that some men will be willing to use birth control pills to beat their porn addiction. And one of the things is birth control pills are readily available. You can get them from your pharmacy, because people sometimes have sex and then they don't want the pregnancy and things like that. So I actually think that some men will be willing to risk it. Because think about it, if you are a young man and then you had low self-esteem and you got yourself addicted to pornography, and then it rewires your brain to some extent, especially when you're young. I think the age of use does matter, and it kind of fucks up your reward circuitry. But it is an interesting idea in the future. But something like that, for example, when someone gets given a birth control pill, the pharmacist or the doctor doesn't necessarily ask them why they want a birth control pill. They just get given a birth control pill, and that has become a norm. And in that way, they don't have to discuss their issues if they don't want to. And I'm wondering if that should be a future research for like clinical trials and stuff. Because of the risks, I imagine that it might not be an issue, but I genuinely believe that some men might have already tried this and it has been successful. So should the birth control pill be looked at as a future issue to treat pornography addiction in the future? So there could be pilot studies on this. So one of the problems with these progesterone things is that with most medications you have to like titrate the dose, like 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams of beta blockers, or this much milligrams of Ritalin. But with this, it's kind of like, I don't know whether you can readily find a right dose for it, but I think that with some men they would be willing to do it, and at the very minimum, maybe research to look at what sort of issues using the birth control pill for treat pornography addiction could have, if it is plausible, because I actually think that is a low, cost-effective potentially cost-effective method of treating pornography addiction using the current health infrastructure and apparatus and training that people have.
Fuck her right in the pussy! Wow!
Did you ever make anything happen? Anything you couldn't explain? You're a
Scrublaw.
Harry.
You fucking what, mate?
Dear
FaZe Potter.
We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School.
Memes and quick scoping.
In a few moments, you will pass through these doors and join your
clanmates.
Keep an eye on the staircases. They like to
360.
Good afternoon.
Clan.
Welcome to your first
No scoping.
lesson. Stick your right hand over the
Intervention.
and say,
Wrecked.
Wrecked.
Wow!
Snipers. Snipers. Snipers.
exactly where do you think you're going?
Do you really have the scar? Wicked.
Mr. Potter, our new celebrity. First years should note that the
Wilderness.
is strictly forbidden, that no magic is to be used between the classes in the corridors.
Petrificus.
Fuck you.
The third floor corridor is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to suffer a most
MLG. Ogre.
Understand this, Harry, because it's very important. Not all
Memes are zany.
I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed. Or worse.
Kicked from FaZe.
She needs to sort out her priorities.
I think it is clear that we can expect great things from you.
Shut the fuck up. You're a fucking cunt. Shut the fuck up. You're a stupid cunt. Suck my dick. Shut the fuck up. Stop being a fucking cunt. Shut the fuck up. Nobody even wants you here. Yeah. What? Yeah. I just wanna let you know you're a stupid fucking cunt. Go ahead and run your mouth, pussy, I don't give a fuck. You're a stupid piece of shit. You're a stupid fucking bitch. Get the fuck up off my dick. Get the fuck up off my dick.
and your fucking life. I really gotta emphasize, no one cares if you're alive. You're a fucking penis hole, grab a dick and eat it whole. I need to know if you were dropped when you were just a fetus though. You're so fucking ugly and your face is fucking foul. Jeez, you're so fucking loud, can you shut your fucking mouth? Can you shut the fuck up? You're a fucking cunt. Shut the fuck up. You're a stupid cunt. Suck my dick. Shut the fuck up. Stop being a fucking cunt. Shut the fuck up. Nobody even wants you here. Yeah. Close your fucking mouth, you're just really fucking dense. If you hate me, why you talking? You don't make no fucking sense. Got a sad life, go to fucking hell. Are you stupid or disabled, man? I can't fucking tell. Man, you're a fucking dumb shit, you don't even run shit. Get the fuck up out my face and go to hell and eat a dick. Come and catch these hands, boy, come and match these bands, boy. I'm not crazy, I just do it all because I can, boy. I hope you fucking die in a high-speed car crash. I hope you fucking fall head first and get your neck cracked. I hope you have some beautiful children that die from cancer. I hope you catch Zika when your wife gets pregnant. I hope you win the lottery and die the next day, and your daughter has to see you getting lowered in your grave. Like, that was a little dark. I'm sorry. That was a little dark. Very poor taste. Shut the fuck up. I shouldn't have said that. You're a fucking cunt. Actually, no, I should have. Shut the fuck up. I didn't say enough. You're a stupid cunt. Suck my dick. Shut the fuck up. Stop being a fucking cunt. Shut the fuck up. Nobody even wants you here.
Okay, so this is an interesting thing. So I mentioned earlier that sometimes these communities exist. So the millennial generation is an interesting one. So I mentioned earlier that or people, there's loads of different pornography communities, like anthropomorphic like porn communities, cartoon porn communities, and that is a controversial one. But for someone who doesn't actually was never even exposed to this content in the first place, this would be like, why does this even exist? This is completely wrong. But I think that some context should be provided, and I think that millennials, especially, the pressure to conform can be weird at times. But millennials were exposed to this period of society where society was like rapidly increasing. Computers were there for the boomer generation, but that was like Windows 98. And in our generation, we literally saw computers massively increase in their capability, and that was like really interesting. So millennials literally grew up being told from primary school the world is like one day humanity will go reach the stars. And I remember there's a 4chan meme that millennials are lucky or unlucky in some sense. We're too young to have the job security and the potentially high salaries that boomers have. I don't know if OK Boomer is true and that's just a stereotype, but at the same time, we weren't lucky enough to be born in the period of time to have the internet stabilized. For the younger generations, I'm not sure, maybe I could be wrong, maybe technology is still advancing at a rapid rate, but for the younger generations, I wonder whether the internet has stabilized a bit. We know what the internet is going to become, whereas in our generation, people are like, what is the internet going to be? Will we have flying computers that follow us around and stuff like that? And that is interesting. So some millennials, I don't know, have maybe they had an implicit mindset where if possibility for it existed, it was going to be done. And I'm sorry, but some of millennials were one of the I think this is a plus, one of the most creative generations in my opinion. But some of it made no sense. So think about things like Filthy Frank. That is awesome. It did make sense in my opinion, but the boomer generation, I don't know if they ever did something like that, or maybe that's just some bit. I think millennials should be proud of themselves. But this is just an example of a video and just show how weird millennial meme culture and like the social dynamics at times. Look at this video. To a person that doesn't use the internet that often, this would be like, what the heck did I see?
Does it ever make anything happen? Anything you couldn't explain? You're a
Scrubble. You fucking what, mate? FaZe Potter.
We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School.
Memes and quick scoping.
In a few moments, you will pass through these doors and join your
clanmates.
Keep an eye on the staircases. They like to...
360.
Good afternoon, clan.
welcome to your first
No scoping.
lesson. Stick your right hand over the
Intervention.
and say,
Rhett.
Wrecked.
Wow.
Snipers. Snipers. Snipers.
exactly where do you think you're going?
Do you really have that? Wicked.
Mr. Potter, our new celebrity. First years should note that the
Wilderness.
is strictly forbidden, with no magics to be used between the classes and the corridors.
Petrificus?
Fuck you.
The third floor corridor is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to suffer a most
MLG. Ogre.
understand this, Harry, because it's very important. Not all.
Memes are zany.
I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed. Or worse.
Kicked from FaZe.
She needs to sort out her priorities.
I think it is clear that we can expect great things from you.
Okay, so that video had a lot of stuff, but believe it or not, that was actually many millennials' childhood memories. There was this thing called FaZe Clan and Optic, and you type it into YouTube, like FaZe Clan memes, like it was really, really, really crazy. So many millennial like meme videos and meme culture. I wonder if in the future, when people like examine these things, every generation will have its own meme culture. But for millennials, like their meme culture was like things didn't necessarily need to make sense, and if there was an opportunity to be edgy, it was edgy. And this is interesting because it isn't really like a rap, like I'm going to kill you, like edgy, like yeah, like smoke this, edgy kind of thing. But it's interesting. But this is important because I came back earlier and I told you about in a slide earlier I told you about something called shipping, where people like write romantic stories about like cartoon characters or that they saw in childhood or like adolescence, and that is really important because that might be something that people look at despicably. But even Reddit had an official, I think it is still that, an official shipping thing, and it is interesting because if you look at that video, for many boomer parents or parents of millennials will think of Harry Potter possibly originally as a child's thing, which it was. And there was originally a lot of controversy, like Harry Potter is witchcraft and all of that stuff. But it is interesting because look at that video. Even though it is a childhood memory, and if you ask most millennials, they would also say, yeah, it is like a child's kind of movie. There is literally, in that same movie, in Harry Potter, in a spoof comedy video of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, there was literally a broom being replaced with a sniper rifle, an ogre randomly doing stuff, Akon or Snoop Dogg, I don't know who that is, it has literally become Professor Severus Snape, and the guy that helps sell Harry Potter is the one has a yellow party hat, which is actually one of the most expensive things in RuneScape, which I wish that I was there for, because if you have party hat, you can actually sell them for real money. But although real world trading is apparently, I think it's banned according to Jagex rules. But that's actually interesting. So millennials don't do this deliberately, but sometimes it occurs in an unconscious effort. It isn't like the kind of like edgy. It's weird to describe this kind of like edginess or creativity. Millennials are very creative, in my opinion. it isn't like the kind of creativity where you make like a rap music like I'm going to kill you, and I think that is kind of like useful. Maybe it's like a form of like spiritual bypassing or something like that, or like association splitting. But this actually emphasizes why you need to think carefully about these issues, because I actually think that in the future, especially with changing laws and the legal system changing, for example, a couple of years ago, for example, I think Lollicon's legal in Japan now, it wasn't legal before. Cartoon pornography, the precedents are also potentially changing. I'm not sure, I'm not a lawyer, what legalist terminology to use. But the people in power, or things like the judges, might not necessarily be up to date. It is impossible for someone to keep up to date sometimes. And these kind of videos need to be made, and possibly even readily cited, because think about it. What if, for example, someone who made a story about Avatar Aang fucking Katara and having kids, which there is real. Some of the stories were like genuine like drama, but there are like online stories of like sex stories of this. And if a millennial, I don't know, 30, 40 years old, goes to prison later on, like, should they be a paedophile? No. And I think that these kind of videos are important to make, because even though someone might talk about it in a conversation in a canteen or in a courtroom, these kind of videos enable people and academics and other people and even judges to see the context of things. So this is why I think that I also encourage other people to make these videos, but also be careful. Okay, so this is another thing. So I want to emphasize something. So case studies or actual cases are one of the best ways that you can inform people about the need for sensitivity. Not necessarily sensitivity or understanding. So I've given you an idea of the context of which millennials grew up in, many millennials grew up in. I'm sorry, but millennials grew up with things like 4chan and like Lizard Squad and all of that stuff, and it's not a joke, but like the internet was crazy when millennials were around, and I'm not that clever to do all that coding stuff, but I'm just giving you an example. But that isn't always, even then, it isn't always readily understandable. So I'm going to give you an example. What I think is one of the best reasons why just because someone draws something, they're not always a bad person, or not always like a pedo, or not necessarily doing it deliberately. So consistency and things like this matters, because I genuinely believe that many millennials have used Rule 34 and might continue doing so out of habit. For example, when people masturbate to pornography, sometimes they have favourite videos. People have favourite porn stars. I'm sorry, they do. And they go back to the same video. So I remember, for example, when I got addicted to pornography in primary school, I masturbated to Lisa Simpson pornography, some of which showed her as a child. Because I was also a child at that age, maybe 7 or 8. And because I actually fancied her for a bit. And so I, even into adolescence, because I failed to make friends because I was a minority and stuff, I used to go back to those same videos and those same comics, because they also reminded me of my childhood in a weird kind of way, although I wasn't necessarily a paedophile as such, although most of the time I watched adult pornography. So I think that this is really, really careful to consider. So one of the most, another millennial experience is the video game made by Artix Entertainment, which is known as Adventure Quest Worlds. So Adventure Quest Worlds is an MMO, so an MMO is a massive online multiplayer game. It's kind of like World of Warcraft, but Adventure Quest Worlds is a game MMO made by Artix Entertainment, which was commonly played and very popular, partly because it used what is known as the Flash coding engine or something like that. So that meant that, unlike many MMOs, it could be played by computers with lower processing power, and also it could be that. And this meant that, because the fact that it could be played online with computers with less processing power, it meant that it was more accessible. So a lot of millennials played it, and it had like chaos laws and something like that. It was also very good. They also made games like Adventure Quest and MechQuest and stuff like that. Unfortunately, it isn't as popular anymore for various reasons. One of them being the fact that Adobe Flash Player has been phased out, and it is no longer and as a result, the company Artix Entertainment has had to make like a launcher for it. So that means that there's more steps to do things. I know that might sound bad, but sometimes people can be so stressed that sometimes like that can make a difference as to whether or not someone decides to purchase a game or play a game. Because think about it, have you ever like, you know when like you go into the kitchen and then you see something on the top shelf, you open the fridge and then sometimes you grab whatever's on the top shelf and that is what you eat. Even though, and that might be unhealthy, and even though what is healthier might be at the back of a drawer in your fridge, if you're really stressed and you have work demands and workplace stresses, people tend to go for what is most readily accessible, and that is one of the reasons I think Adventure Quest Worlds has dropped in popularity. But anyway, back to what I was going on. So there was an artist in this game called Miltonius, or Nulgath, I think that was the artist's name, and he was one of the most popular artists. So in this game, art made pleasure to view well, the design of items made to view well, and that was very, very, very appealing to many youngsters and adolescents. Even some adults played this game. Even though they called them children's games, many of the top players are adults, because let's face it, like, if you're an adult, like, if you're a child, you have to ask your parents for money. If you're an adult, like, that is the only way you're going to, like, have a lot of money to spend on games and stuff. Like, even things like Yu-Gi-Oh, like, and trading cards games, it is the genuine truth. It is like that in the real world. Only like adults are going to be able to afford a car and stuff like that. But putting that aside, so one of the most popular artists in this game was someone called Nulgath or Miltonius, and that was his artist name. So an artist name that I'm not an artist myself, but for anyone that doesn't know, from what I can gather, an artist name is a name which is used by people as a pseudonym for their artwork. And they use it sometimes as popularity, to be catchy, and sometimes because just to have like a professional profile, or maybe it's like a generic trend. It's a norm to do that in the art community. But he made some of the best art there, and many people liked his art, to the point where many people played the game just to get his art, and he actually had his own area and cutscene and quests. And unfortunately, something bad happened in that it turned out that he, in his past, made an amateur video before he joined this company of a elf girl who looked like a child getting raped. And I have seen this, but it isn't like a completely explicit video, but it was controversial. And they found it out. And unfortunately, I'm not sure it was true or not, but some people say that he had to leave this company because of this. And what is true is, I remember playing this game at that time, and at that point in time, the company actually had to make a statement, and they didn't call it out directly, but most people knew that is one of the reasons that so basically they kind of addressed it like informally, like, or at some point on the actual Adventure Quest website's homepage. So this is interesting because the artist is not obviously a paedophile as such, but this kind of controversy potentially ruined their art career. And this is interesting to think about, because think about it. So I don't know what the context of this is, and please don't go ragging on people, and most people won't do, but think about it. So some people decide early on what their career is going to be, because in like GCSEs or high school, you need to decide, what am I going to be? Am I good at science? Am I good at art? Am I good at mathematics? Or should I go for a manual labour job? Do I need an apprenticeship? Do I want to be a plumber? So based on that, people prepare for their career early. Like, if, for example, you need a 4.0 GPA if you want to be a doctor, and you have to do that postgraduate in America. In the UK, you can do that undergraduate. So you need to decide that early. So if this kind of artist did that, and nude modelling is also a thing. If this kind of artist, so if someone decided to be an artist in their adolescence, when they're deciding what they want to do when they become an adult, then they are still under the age of 18, and then they will potentially be making like art for this kind of art with their frame of reference or their body in mind. So that might be one of the reasons they do this thing. And I'm not talking about explicit art, because I think that explicit art is always bad. But what I think is interesting is that, for example, I know friends that did art when I was studying, and they did nude modelling. So not them nude modelling, because that would be illegal, but they did nude modelling, but they still drew like adult art based on what they saw. And it is interesting to think about, because a while ago, like ages ago, like women couldn't show any flesh, and something like that picture in the right hand corner with the Gravelin, I think that's the name of the character, could potentially be bad. Okay, so this is interesting. So bit more on the Akue Nolgath controversy. So basically, he was initially called Miltonius, and then in the actual game itself, his name changed to Nolgath, and his art was amazing, and it is really amazing. To get a job at some of these companies, you know how like when you're young, a lot of children play video games, and they're like, I wish I could play. Get a job at these companies, and then you realise how much effort goes into this and how good sometimes you need to be. But this artist's art was amazing. Like, people did sometimes played non-stop just for the art. But some people say that he had to change his name in the game from Miltonius to Nolgath. I might have pronounced that wrong, because of the actual controversy. And even though he changed his name to Nolgath, it actually got to the point where he had to leave, and they had to kind of allude to it in a way. I don't know, public management, like they had to manage the situation, and he left the company. But it is interesting to think about that this. I don't know whether or not maybe this isn't true, and this in this instance, this artist's career. This incident was actually not that relevant, or not that significant, but it's interesting to think that an artist's career could be permanently ruined by this, because I've actually seen it, and it is difficult to find the actual original thing, but it isn't that part. It isn't that that sexual. The actual animation is only like not that hard, not that bad. It's more like a anime fantasy kind of thing. Like in Dungeons and Dragons, for example, sometimes you get like elves or dwarves who are short. For example, if you have like a female dwarf character, they're going to be short, and that is interesting to think about. But in my opinion, it did have an impact, because there's a website called Encyclopedia Dramatica, which is kind of like, it's not really a trolling website, but it's kind of like a everything sucks kind of meme culture that is well known. It's kind of like 4chan on the internet, and this is what it says about the artist. It says, it isn't like a race. It is kind of like a weird website. It literally takes the mick of everything, but this is what it says. It says Miltonius, perv animator and part-time lolicon artist. Miltonius is probably the only cool part of the AE team who was hired after he masturbated himself to the rape scene in Akumi. And I think Akumi is the name of the character or the animation that people said should count as lolicon. Used to have some pretty nice stuff in Akui World, but Cicero found out, got rage, now known as Nolgath because that's the Artix, and Cicero Artix being the guy, the pseudonym, the guy who owns the company, and that is his like video game name in his Adventure Quest worlds. We're soiling the name of good militaries with this shit in game. So basically, if it is on Encyclopedia Dramatica, which is like a culturally dynamic force, especially for millennials, I don't know about like the generations after millennials, I think it did make a significant impact, and it's a shame that his career got affected, because I think consistency matters, and it is interesting to think about, because think about it, what if you, because from the looks of it, it was only a one-time thing. That was the only thing that this artist did. Other than that, there was nothing else did, and it wasn't like a sex scene, in my opinion. I've seen the scene myself. It wasn't a sex scene. It was kind of like a edgy as possible kind of scene. And it is really sad to think that someone's career was ended like this. It happens, and sometimes there's good things and bad things, but it is really sad. And sometimes especially for millennials, they were the first people to do a lot of things, but there's always first, and who knows, maybe in the future this kind of thing won't happen, but it's always going to be a controversy, because when it comes to like the internet, there's always constant debate, I suppose. Okay, so Adventure Quest Worlds, Miltonius, Nolgath controversy. So this is an interesting thing. So I'm saying this in the spirit of free discussion. So I want to get something right. Free discussion doesn't mean that everything should be allowed. They're supraordinate things. So before saying this, I want to talk about what is known as a supraordinate goal. So I know people say, like, you know, everything should be free. And I think that discussion is possible, but discussion doesn't necessarily mean that the content necessarily needs to be created. Although, because think about it. For example, in society, we want at the very minimum, you know, a decent education or maybe like clean water. Everyone has a right to clean water, some people say. And I think that's a good that at the very minimum, that is a good goal for any society to have. But having clean water means I don't litter. So in a weird kind of way, I don't get to do whatever I want. If society wants clean water and clean roads, I have to be respectful towards other people, and that is a supraordinate goal. I have to not litter and use the bins. Like many countries in the UK, we have a bin color-coded system where, like, I have to put things in the bin. I can't just, when I finish something, leave it on the floor, because supraordinately, that will mean that the environment becomes dirty and things die, and that is more important. So that, in my opinion, is necessary. If I want a medication to be developed, that requires a lot of effort, and that requires some free speech and stuff as well. So just to verify, so I think that picture in the middle on the right hand side is Akumi, and that is the animation. So if you look at the character, she has a bikini, but there is an actual like rape scene and stuff, but it isn't in what I consider to be a Xvideos or Pornhub level thing. Now, there is a spectrum of like online, like some websites have more extreme content than others. For example, there's websites like Heavier and Motherless, which have extreme porn videos, which are legal, and then there's like Scat, which is like shit eating and stuff like that. And then there's like Reluctance, where there's even like incest roleplay and things like Xvideos and stuff like that, which is it is interesting. So basically, okay, so it is interesting. So children should always be protected, but it is interesting because I think that many millennials aren't doing this deliberately, but the law is changing such that they might accidentally come across as a pedo, which is interesting. This is interesting because the internet is so large that algorithms might be the only way to police it. So think about it. So think about, for example, a person, a data center, like sifting information through. So they might not know that a person has been looking at the same thing from primary school. And they might think so-and-so could be a criminal, so-and-so could be a paedophile. And that is interesting. Most millennials aren't paedophiles. Be careful, because this is visceral, and I think that like most of this pornography, my personal opinion is that shouldn't be allowed. I'm not talking this instance, but to some extent, like, I'm not going to go into it because I don't want to risk offending people. But especially when it comes to children, I think that we need to be really, really careful. But on the other hand of things, there are also other controversial aspects of pornography. So, for example, incest in many countries is banned, and then like there's incest memes, like they look like, you know, like in the UK we have like Jeremy Kyle, and we have memes like so and so slept with so and so, like, and it is interesting, and because. So I mentioned earlier that there's videos, there's a spectrum of like severity or intensity when it comes to porn videos. So some of them can be really explicit on some websites, and some of them are not. For example, there's companies like porn channels like Xhamster, which are more moderate in my opinion, and then the companies like Xvideos, like Pornhub. Pornhub is more moderate. Xvideos is more intense than Pornhub, and then there's more extreme ones like Heavier and Motherless, which has like scat eating porn, and I don't think it's real like shit, because I think it's just most of it is like ice cream, I've heard. But it is interesting to think about. So even on Xvideos, which is a well-known thing, there was in public domain, I think I might be wrong on this, there was actually at one point a public domain sexual education project in India by a company. I don't know if it was official, whether it was unofficial, but I think it memed at one point for the millennial generation of people using Xvideos. So I personally think that you shouldn't really be told. be telling children about these sites, and in some cases I would rather not have been told. So I found out about websites like Xvideos because I actually overheard adults discussing them one time when I was in McDonald's. I know it sounds stupid. Basically, I was eating something with my parents, and then some adults were discussing pornography in McDonald's, and then I overheard the word Xvideos, and that is how one of the ways like my pornography addiction enhanced itself. But it is interesting because on Xvideos and some of these more extreme websites, you have reluctance porn, where women pretend to get raped, or incest porn, where like mum son videos, even on Pornhub, which is a well-known thing. It is and is interesting because incest is illegal in many countries, and genetically it causes a lot of genetic diseases and stuff. So where do you draw that line? Where do you draw the line? On this, when it comes to children, I think the line should be more absolute. But when it comes to this, think about it. Where do you draw that line? So obviously, Pornhub is a well-known website, and that Pornhub works, I think, with a lot of like stakeholders to try and like advertise itself and make pornography like safer for people. I think, and they've done very well in that regard. But it is interesting to think about. If that is true, then why does reluctance porn exist? Why does incest porn exist? It isn't real incest porn, but it's not a real incest porn. And there are also some ethical and moral concerns. So some people say that some of these women are trafficked, or that some of these women don't know that they have a better option, and they might think that it is their only option. But those concerns might always be there, and it's interesting to think about. So if incest is illegal, why is that there? Why? Sometimes like people do some heavy digging and they find these special niche websites which only few people know about, and they go on them. But Pornhub, for example, has mum-son videos with actual professional porn stars in it. So it's interesting to think about, why is that even there? So that's something to think about. I'm not an expert in this kind of thing, but I just want to make this video to kind of discuss it, and also for a bit of fun. Okay, so this is what I think is interesting. So, with the Noor gas controversy in mind, many boomers might not understand this, and I would add a bit of warning here, as to completely disavow the previous generation. I don't think we should completely disavow the views of a previous generation, like the boomers, and be like, okay, boomer. It is true. Sometimes it is important to have that cultural force in mind, but at the same time, it is also important to have the views of the boomers in mind. But sometimes I think that, I'm not trying to criticize the boomers here, but sometimes it's also good to use, when you communicate with other generations, it is a good idea to use the media of the other previous generation in order to provide analogies for what we're trying to say, because analogies and metaphors are very easy ways of thinking that by which people can understand, and using examples of media as well is another easier way for people to communicate to each other. And I think that one of the interesting things about the boomers, so the internet didn't really take off during the boomers generation, but it did during the millennial generation. And I think that one of the interesting points is that in the future, because the internet is going to be around for many generations from birth, there's going to be maybe like arguments over whose generational content should be visible. I personally think that in the future there'll be such a term in like knowledge circles, academia, such as generational content, because if you think about it, so we grew up with Gen Zs, probably Gen Ys as well, with things. I think those are the generations after millennials or something like that. We grew up with Hunger Games, that's later on, Harry Potter and things like that, whereas the boomers and maybe, I don't know, are the hippie generation the same as the boomer generation, grew up with Star Wars and things like that. And that is really going to have an impact, I think, because in the future, like imagine 50 years time. So in 50 years time, we as millennials might be like 60, 80, I don't know, very old, but at the same time, because we literally grew up on the internet, we will still want the internet to represent our views. But think about it, there's only so many tabs and titles and thumbnails on YouTube. So how does this get resolved? I actually think it could lead to arguments, or is it something to be worried about, or is it something that we don't need to worry about, and by that time computers will be fast enough, or maybe the YouTube client or website will be changed to the point at which you can indicate what generation you are, and it will represent different types of content. So if you sign up to YouTube and Gmail with your date of birth, would it only show you the content from your generation, so that you feel represented on the internet? And because YouTube is also like considered somewhat of a public source like Google is, although I think it is like a business at the same time. But it is interesting to think about, like, some generations, like in the millennial generation, some people would think that they can't survive without the internet. But it's interesting because I spoke about the Akumi controversy with an Adventure Quest Worlds artist from Artix Entertainment, an example, and I'm not going to use the name anymore because I was using it as an example, and I don't want to risk talking about specific individuals. But it is interesting to talk about because it is very, very easy to say for someone from an older generation to go and say, oh, look at this is just a simple thing, like, of course it shouldn't be done in the first place, it's just pornography. But at the same time, think about something from the Star Wars generation, which the boomers and the hippie generation might have grown up with. So we know that there is Princess Leia, which is sometimes a childhood fancy of the boomers. So, but at the same time, believe it or not, in Adventure Quest Worlds, there is many millennials who've played Adventure Quest Worlds will know this. There is a character named Gravelin who is a Doom Knight and who is the daughter of her father, Sepultura, who I think is what used to be Valen, who is a knight of King Ultion in Adventure Quest Worlds. And I think it's linked to another one of Artix Entertainment's games, Dragon Fable, which is a very good game. I'd highly check out Artix Entertainment. It's a good game, and I'm in no way connected to anyone in this. I'm just using it because it was very culturally popular for the millennial generation. But what is really interesting is that one of the plots in this video game, Adventure Quest Worlds, was that she got captured and she got literally dressed up like Princess Leia, and then like you had to try and free her. And that is interesting because this game was played by people in their teenage and like later childhood. So maybe like later childhood. I know people say that you have to be 13. I don't know if it's 13 to sign up, but I imagine that kids slightly younger did sign up, but that you shouldn't ban video games because of that. But it is interesting. So forget about what the actual form of the pornography is in the first place, but at the very minimum, the argument, based on the fact that the boomer generation had things like Princess Leia, which was controversial, I don't think that the argument that the conversation should not take place in the first place is a viable one. But from an actual realism standpoint, I think it is fan service. So fan service is basically where you have like female characters in anime and sometimes video games who look like sexual-ish and bit innuendo, and it happens quite a lot in my opinion. What I know, although I haven't watched many animes. But from an actual realism standpoint, I actually think that the plot is a bit stupid, because think about it. In my opinion, I suppose you are humiliating that you're the daughter of your enemy or Princess Leia or someone else, but in reality, I wonder, did it really happen? Like, if you captured someone, like, would you really like display them on full air? Like, what if like they killed themselves, or what if like because of the humiliation of being tortured? What if like Gravelin killed herself because of the humiliation of being tortured? What if like one of Valen's, like King Ultion's knights, went to kill her rather than like risk her like spilling beans and stuff? From a law standpoint, it is interesting, but I think you could argue that yes, it is kind of fan service, or maybe it isn't fan service. Maybe, you know, when they were thinking of the plot, they didn't think, oh, let's make something sexual. Maybe they thought, maybe because some of these video game artists and video game designers were from the boomer generation and they were older than millennials, they kind of thought, let's take some inspiration. So, you know, something from Star Wars. Yeah. Oh, that looks like a good idea. Let's copy it. And it isn't really copying and pasting stuff, but it is inspiration. So sometimes these things arise kind of like based on inspiration, not because of the intent to draw sexual stuff. And I think that could be argued somewhat because of the fact that you can have there are actually lightsaber weapons in this game, which I think are inspired by Star Wars. So let's have a talk. Why is this conversation so important? Just to remind us once again of why it's important to get various viewpoints. So the conversation, having a conversation doesn't necessarily mean sanctioning, but the fact that Gravelin and the Princess Leia pictures are from Adventure Quest and AQ Worlds, from Adventure Quest and Star Wars, respectively, are similar, shows that maybe there's something similar, maybe about there's probably hypotheses such as way sexuality arises, or maybe like in a way many boomer like elements like comics and maybe sky science fiction did have their sexuality in them of their own accord. And it is also, first of all, it's important for multiple reasons. First and foremost, I think that porn addiction is a problem, and it is ruining men's lives, and it is controversial and something men's and women's lives, and it is something that needs to be talked about. And I think that, and there's also other arguments, like sub arguments, like what counts as child pornography, what doesn't count as child pornography, what counts as like being edgy, what doesn't count as being edgy. For example, I showed you the greatest orgy of homosexuality video on Newsgrounds. That literally means when I was in year 7 or late primary school, I think, with actual Care Bears in it. Care Bears being a primary school cartoon. So it is interesting. That was, to me, could be more on the edgy side, even though other people might disagree. But we need to come up with solutions maybe to tackle pornography addiction without harming the pornography community, because it is also one of the bastions of free speech. Because think about it. Pornography also, if I say the word fuck you or something like that on TikTok nowadays, or even YouTube, I don't know about me, but unless I'm a big time YouTuber, maybe from the olden days, I could be completely wrong. I personally have the viewpoint that I will get banned. But pornography is one of those areas where I can say things like that, maybe even make political statements without at risk. And I think that is why we should be careful of potentially unnecessarily harming the pornography community, but the porn industry. But one of the things I would have to say is that another thing is that we need to potentially rethink what our definition is of what a discussion means. So in the olden days, we tend to have this view of democratic discussion, but it isn't like Star Wars where Yoda has it off with Darth Sidious simply for having a discussion, and then Yoda goes away. In the past, people had to risk their life to potentially have a discussion. They had to stay in the same room. Two kings had to stay in the same room, and there was a risk that a fight could break out. And that meant that sometimes people could be like, no, there is too much risks. This kind of conversation is not enough. But in this day and age, a person can upload a YouTube video, not necessarily target at anyone and talk about it. And it is the truth. You think about it for religious texts. So, for example, there are many religious texts online, and many people, like, for example, read things like religious texts, but avoid actual churches or other religious physical institutions, because religions can be a source of cults sometimes. So on the internet, for example, has enabled people to have access to various forms of texts or various niches of material and media without having the risk of being exposed to the physical area. So, for example, some homeless people avoid homeless shelters because some of them can be cultish, from what I've heard. I don't know whether this is true or not. Or there is a fear that because the homeless people cannot defend themselves, if that were the case, they would potentially get effed. So in that same manner, being on the internet means that a homeless person might be able to go to a library, or use the Wi-Fi of the library just out while not in the library, and access such self-help content without anyone judging them or knowing what their weaknesses are, taking advantage of them. So I can, for example, have this video online, and you can watch it and make your own assumptions and come to your own conclusions without you directly arguing with me. What the nature of what a conversation means now has somewhat changed, and I think it's important to consider that is, in the boomers' time, it was maybe not the case, but nowadays having a conversation has become more safer, and even passive conversations are arguably quite dynamic. It is interesting because there's various video upload sites. There's YouTube is the main one, but there's also other sites like BitChute, which it does have a bit of a right-wing controversy over it, but it is also, some would argue, a free speech bastion, which is why this video is also uploaded on there. And I don't think this video would last on YouTube, me personally, which is why I'm probably not going to upload it on there. Although I personally think YouTube is an amazing site, but I'm also worried about potentially. I'm currently uncertain about who will access this content because it is a serious issue. But I'm wondering this: would a person like an adolescent person like benefit from viewing this video? Who knows? But I'm not going to go into that. I'm just wondering that because because I was addicted to porn early on in my life. If this kind of presentation had existed, how would I have benefited from it? Okay, so this is another example of fan service and things in the video game industry. So fan service is basically where you have like a sexual innuendo or something like sexy, and it is the truth. You find people say fan service and they might think, oh, this is lewd in anime, but this actually, you see it all the time. You see it all the time in industries like the perfume industry. You see it all the time in industries like the racing industry, where you have like, I don't know, I've never been to a race myself, although I've seen it on TV, where you have like girls that have like, you know, the lap or something, and then I think you have it in like industries like boxing, where you have like girls like, or wrestling, where you have like girls like saying like round 1 or round 2, and then they're always like really sexy. That's always been there to some extent. That is part of marketing, and although it is debatable. So, and even in ancient times, I imagine maybe it was like that. So it is interesting. So even though like the video games are sometimes looked down upon, this has always been there to some extent. So you need to sometimes widen your context. You know, is it porn? Is it not porn? And to what extent does something count as, for example, like lolicon or child pornography? So for example, look at the thing to the left. That is like considered fan service. Or if I was going to, I don't know, if I was a woman going shopping for a bikini, I would consider that a normal picture. The context of its placement also matters. And here's something in the middle. So the middle one is something known as Mega Man, which is a video game. I don't think I've ever played Mega Man, but basically Mega Man is basically a series of video games. I think this particular game is quite old. I think it's older than when I was born, and basically that there is a joke in it in which I think there's a button you press where the player can reach out, and it's meant to be like an interact with item button or something like that. And then basically what happens is that the player, girl in the middle, says, "Stop it, Mega Man! Stop it, Mega Man! Stop it, Mega Man!" And that is it. Which is like basically kind of like, if a kid, this game is like, I think aimed at kids maybe, so obviously that is like an innuendo to you shouldn't touch a girl's breast. So think about it. Are the game developers right in putting that, or did they just want to be a cheeky? You know, think about it. If the video game character is a child, and the game character is a man, I think the Lord, is it is it suitable? And it is interesting because people don't always come in packages. Sometimes people, unfortunately, have stress as well. Some people, for example, get into the video game industry because they're stressed and because they want to do things, and then that's how they express themselves. It's maybe like for stuff like music, where it sometimes comes and you need to like express it in a way that is like socially acceptable sometimes. So maybe they did that because they were testosterone-filled games role players and they felt appropriate. But it's interesting to see whether or not you think that it is appropriate. And there's also another game which is relatively new on Steam, which is where you get an award on Steam for peeking under a girl's skirt. And it's interesting. One of the weirdest things is that because like the rules in video game universes don't work as the same in rules in this universe, like, you can have like a girl who looks like 10. You've seen the memes, and then is like 5,000 years old, 500 years old, and it's like, what is this? Like, what is this? And it's just like, wow. And then it is really interesting. So these are the videos in question. So this is the Mega Man video to the left, which I'll now play, where he reaches out and grabs the breast and it says, "Stop it, Mega Man, stop it, Mega, stop it, Mega Man." And it's interesting to think, on one hand, there's various reasons that could have arisen. In my opinion, the developers of this video game are obviously not like, sexual perverts or anything like that. And one of them, it could be a joke. One of them, it could be like, back then men were more testosterone filled because pornography wasn't more well developed and people used to fantasize about those things. And another thing is that maybe they wanted to teach people, good manners and that you should never touch a girl's breasts. But here is the video, and it's well known apparently in the Nintendo community or something, or by some people. As you can see, ordinarily that would get you arrested in many countries, but he got slapped into the snow. It's very sad. And here on the video to the right is the award for speaking under a girl's skirt. So there was an award for like peeking under a skirt using the camera, and this is actually interesting. So this is interesting because on one hand people might first of all say pervert, and it is true. We need to be careful of visceral reactions when we consider these things, because on one hand, especially when when sex is involved, and also children involved, and especially children's video games. All games, in a way, can be considered children's video games because many children use the internet, and sometimes the parents are not always aware in some way. Or at least children can be exposed to them. For example, many children know about Mortal Kombat, even though it's an 18-rated game. But it is interesting. So there is an award for peeking under a girl's skirt and carefully adjusting the camera and seeing her underwear or something like that. And you have to do this 10 times to get the award. So what is really, really interesting is that are the developers exploring this? Are the developers like voyeurism, I think it is called, like peeking at people's sexual parts or sexual equipment like underwear and stuff? Are the developers of this game, that is this very popular Steam game, I've forgotten what it's called, trying to support that, or could they be unintentionally facilitating that? And I think that we need to be careful because there's a very visceral tendency to have a very visceral reaction. For example, the thought of any person being raped or a child being harmed or anything like that literally is like, no, that should not happen. Whoever does this will be brought to justice. And that is interesting because when we have these visceral reactions, we sometimes do not think out contact, which is why sometimes checklists, think tanks and other groups sometimes come up with checklists for things, because when you're emotionally charged and stressed, you don't always do things properly. But in my opinion, I actually disagree with this. I actually think that this is actually necessary because think about it from this perspective. Many men are literally on palliative care in a weird kind of way. Unfortunately, many men are porn addicted. Many men, unfortunately, are suffering and use video games as a form of palliative care. This could be for various reasons. For example, there are various. Some people say that the dopamine system in some individuals are altered. For example, some people say that from birth, some people have certain polymorphisms of things like dopamine receptors, which means that they are more likely to search out dopamine. And some people say that over time, the dopamine receptors change based on how you do things. But this, I think these two are referred to as incentive salientization, or there's something else. I'm not a qualified scientist. But they're on palliative care, so they get their sense of self-esteem from these video games. And I'm going to be honest here, when you get bullied, or when anything bad happens to you, or when you lose a job, you literally turn into your wounded self. And many people do have a wounded self. Not everyone has a perfect childhood, but many people do have a wounded sense of self. And whatever you're watching, sometimes you will even, as an adult or a child, sometimes you will even see that sexually. I'm sorry, it is the genuine truth. Imagine if you're a 40-year-old unemployed male person, and the only thing that you have in life is video games that sometimes you can get for free, like through Humble Bundle and stuff. As a man, you obviously wish that you could have, be attractive to women. So obviously you would see them sexually. It is unfortunately the truth. And for many men, that in my opinion, that sadly might be the case. So that is a way of recognising them in the community. They will lose money, and it's also recognisable in the community. And I actually think that this Steam Award is a potential opportunity, because think about it. If, from an analytics point of view, from a data analytics point of view, Steam, for example, collects, in my opinion, would probably collect analytics. So the number of people who downloads this game, the number where they downloaded it from, and the number of people who had that award. So, for example, if it turned out that only 5% of people got this award, that would be interesting. But if it turned out that 5% of people come from a third world country elsewhere, then it would be like, wow, is this a public health issue? So I know that data laws are different, but I'm wondering, how does Steam use these laws? Especially when it comes to public health and things like that. If you look that up, I've forgotten the definition for that. But it's interesting to think about. And also, in terms of the fan base and the community, it is kind of it normalizes things, not in a bad way, as in peeking under a girl's skirt is good. I'm sorry, for both genders that is bad. You will get arrested. But I think it enables it to be discussed as in terms of a cultural force. It enables it to be discussed in terms of a cultural force and to be memed. So, for example, anyone like a video game developer or an academic could talk about it in a meme manner. So basically, rather than imagine this: if you are a 40-year-old man and you wanted to be interviewed by a researcher in neuropsychology or something else, or I don't know, anything psychology, or even a doctor, and then someone came up to you, and then maybe you're recruited for a study, and then it was like, oh, this is what happened, I'm interested. I'm interested in this. You know, do you do this? You know, do you use the camera to peek under girls' skirts and private parts in video games, or to see whether or not the developers have built textures for it? That is direct. But in contrast, when you have an award, or when you have like a funnily worded award on Steam, or where like Mega Man gets slapped, that is rememberable, and that makes things less personal. Because on one hand, like, it does teach you, like, there's two contexts, there's two dual contexts. Obviously, it does teach you that you shouldn't do these things, but on the other hand, they can be readily discussed in a funny way that isn't personal. You know, in a forum thread, rather than a person saying, you know, does anyone look under this girl's skirt in this video game? People could say, does anyone have this award? I'm ashamed to admit it, but I have this award. And then people would be like, oh yeah, she's sexy, but yeah, I wouldn't do that to a girl in real life. It's I don't know if I've described it properly, but I think it's more readily discussable, and that is good, because you don't necessarily want this kind of thing being in the underworld. And at the end of the day, these are video games, and while it is important and it needs to be discussed, there isn't as much as a threat compared to like real life, to a real life person doing this. And I think that is important that these awards stay there. In my opinion, it is a good thing that is happening. But in terms of these awards or things, because where the possibility exists, that is interesting. I can't really elaborate on all the facets of this, but I definitely think that it is interesting. But another thing is that just because someone does it in a video game doesn't mean that they're going to do it in real life. It is the genuine truth. I'm sorry, but most video game players and most men that are addicted to pornography, in my opinion, do not want to do anything harmful to a woman. Some of them have low self-esteem, and maybe some of them have very, very poor self-esteem, and they're very frightened and they don't always know what to do. And sometimes various communities, they go to various communities, such as the Red Pill community, the MGTOW community, and its various facets. And you know, men like to talk about things like beta orbiter theory and all of that stuff. I'm not going to go into it, but in my opinion, many men addicted to like video games and stuff, and the men that get these awards aren't actually scumbags, or and they don't do this in real life. Many of them might have low self-esteem, or might just do it as a joke or an innuendo, in my opinion. Okay, so here's another slide. So in this slide, I'm just going to show that many of in the UK, many in some cases, adult video games were provided, or softcore adult video games were provided in the demo disc for the official PlayStation 2 DVD. So, in my opinion, the video game Rumble Roses was in one of the demo discs for the PlayStation 2, and also as part of that, there was also an actual review for the video game, which was 18+, Playboy Mansion. You know, which is a very sexy and 18-rated game, also part of the Mercenaries 2 PlayStation video game, which many parents could have bought and given to their kids, and therefore got them porn addicted and interested. And within these magazines, there were also adverts for adult-rated images and such. So just to read off some of this text. So the same magazine also had a review of this magazine right here for Playboy the Mansion, where it mentioned that you could do things like scratch and sniff your ass and potentially have sex with multiple women. And this was not readily apparent on the actual cover itself, and it's not readily apparent on the demo disc, which is part of the magazine, which children could play, and many children wanted the PlayStation 2 magazine. So I've never actually played Playboy the Mansion myself, familiar with the Playboy brand, but apparently from what I remember from even reading this magazine as a primary school child, it's kind of like a Sims version of being a pimp. It's like The Sims, but being a pimp, and the adult version of this. And I remember masturbating to the actual review many times, as well as the porn that was in this UK version of this Playboy magazine. And it's interesting because many parents would not know and would not be able to check for sexually explicit material in this. Okay, so this is one of the reviews in that same previous magazine, that Mercenaries magazine for PlayStation 2. So it had a review for the game Playboy the Mansion for PlayStation 2, which is basically an adult version of The Sims, and just highlights it. Though this particular game was in the review in the magazine, but wasn't actually part of the demo disc. It was a video game called Rumble Roses that was a part of the demo disc. So what is a child to do about this? So some children may not tell their parents because they might be sexually confused or attracted to what they find, or some find it funny and point it out to their friends. And I remember being aware of the PlayStation 2 video game Rumble Roses from this, and laughing about how in the actual fight, some of the moves that were really, really sexually explicit, in my opinion, look at the top right-hand corner, would be impossible or even painful. And sometimes I really thought that some of this stuff was stupid, but it actually was one of the reasons I first started masturbating to stuff, even in primary school. So such games might pose a risk because many children want something that might make them special. One reason for having an interest in all video games. So if you wanted to find this out in the future, unfortunately many of the magazines have been repurposed as a future release, and some of the ways that they've been archived have taken off some of this pornographic stuff. And so in some cases, for example, in Australia, the PlayStation 2 magazine didn't come with this stuff because of laws and rules. So could it or could it not have led to pornography addiction in generations like the millennials? So it is interesting to think that some individuals may have told their parents and some individuals may not have told their parents. For example, if some individuals have told their parents, their parents might have told them that they would not have actually bought the PlayStation 2 magazine. And some parents would have thought that for example, that they might get in trouble for telling their parents about it. And so, in terms of what else a child could do, at times I personally, because it led to my porn addiction, wonder if I could have destroyed the disc or scratched the demo disc because it led to my porn addiction, the game Rumble Roses. I don't blame it, but it's one of the factors that led to my own personal porn addiction.
I'll make you cry! Ouch! Done it! Get off!
Okay, so video games is an interesting one, but Rumble Roses in primary school, which came with a demo disc, was one of the reasons I became addicted to pornography without my grandparents knowing. And I was exposed to this early on, and it's interesting to think that because it was on a demo disc, and the cover of the magazine was not really rated XXX or something like that. So this game, in my opinion, was very sexy, and I think it's a very well designed game. But some aspects of this game, Rumble Roses specifically, with the demo disc coming in with multiple games, it's very interesting because there are a variety of sexy characters, with one of my favourite being Candy Cane, who I masturbated to a lot. The Rumble Roses, for anyone that doesn't know, is basically like a sexy version of WWE, but with catfighting girls in a really weird way. And I just kind of play some stuff. Okay, so video games is an interesting one, but Rumble Roses in primary school, which came with a demo disc, was one of the reasons I became interested in pornography without my grandparents knowing. And I was exposed to this early on, and it's interesting to think that because it was on a demo disc, and the cover of the magazine was not really rated XXX or something like that. So this game, in my opinion, was very sexy, and I think it's a very well designed game. But some aspects of this game, Rumble Roses specifically, with the demo disc coming in with multiple games, is very interesting because there are a variety of sexy characters. One of my favourite being Candy Cane, who I masturbated to a lot. The Rumble Roses, for anyone that doesn't know, it's basically like a sexy version of WWE with catfighting girls in a really weird way, and I just kind of play some stuff.
I used to think that any student could be saved with a firm talking to. That was my old teaching style. But I realized that it was not always effective. Teaching is just such a waste of time. When that thought entered my mind during a match, I committed an offense. Oh, the thrill when I saw my opponent's frightened visage. That is the day I discovered the true me. If students will not listen to words, I will make them listen to my whip. Class is in session, ladies. Whose bottom is ready to be whipped? Whose bottom is ready to be whipped? Are you the girl who has been naughty? Speak louder and enunciate. I am speaking to you, Missy. Answer me. I see. So you will not speak when spoken to. Fine. I will whip an answer out of you. Are we ready to answer yet? Good answer.
Teacher, what are you doing?
Oh, Miss Welsh. Do you need a good whipping too?
No thanks. What's with the Halloween costume?
Do you like it?
Sure, but it doesn't seem right for a teacher.
Don't be such a prude. I hate teachers' pets.
Miss Spencer? Get with it. You were the one who straightened me out.
Back off. I like this lifestyle.
Someone's lost it.
In any case, I must oversee your discipline. class is in session.
I can't be my own teacher. No!
Now, is there anyone else who needs discipline?
I was born on the streets. But a friendly nun took me into an orphanage. I've come a long way since that time, and there's no going back. But it's the only place that ever mattered to me. Now it's broke and about to be closed down. I won't let that happen. I'm gonna win this stupid tournament and take that prize money. I'll use whatever dirty trick I have to. I've already thrown everything away to get this far. It's time for beatdown! Are you joking? Do you really think you can take me on?
Miss Welsh!
What? Teach?
Miss Welsh, what are you doing out of school?
Forget me. What the hell are you doing here?
I am asking the questions. What is the meaning of this?
What do you care? Leave me alone.
Wait! Do not disobey me! Oh, darn it. Oh, I'm terribly sorry about all of this.
A schoolgirl? This doesn't seem like the place for you.
Ha! You better not mess with me. For the legendary cowgirl, you don't look so special.
Is that so? Well, let's just get this over with.
But I want to ask you something first.
What's that?
How do you get such a nice rack?
That's none of your business. Bring it on!
Hey, I just want to know.
Who'd have thought that you could beat Cowgirl?
It was nothing. But who are you?
Who do I look like?
One jacked up nurse?
Close enough. Would you like me to make you stronger?
You don't sound like you're all there. I don't think so.
Don't worry.
Beat it. I don't want some crazy-ass nurse touching me.
I see. Well, your loss.
That chick has issues. Hey, you're that judo medalist. What the hell are you doing here?
There's someone I want to fight again, and she's here.
That's one stupid reason.
Maybe you're right, and I'm stupid. What about you?
I'm in it for the money, baby.
Sounds like you're missing out. Wrestling can be a lot of fun.
Whatever, but you know what I'm going through. We're from two way different worlds.
Thank you for the fight.
Dude, hello. You lost. What are you doing thanking me?
Because you gave it your all. And today, I am stronger, thanks to you.
You sound like a few fries short of a kiddie meal.
It looked like you were enjoying yourself. I'll be cheering for you. Good luck.
What a nut job.
Young woman, beat Makoto. You very strong.
So you're the one Makoto is all excited about.
I now avenge Makoto. Prepare.
Avenge? That's trash. But man, I envy her.
Huh?
Never mind. Ready up, you're next.
Aigo and Makoto challenge Candy Cane again.
Sure, bring it on. I'll take you both down.
Could I have the mic 1 second? Miss Welsh, stop this nonsense this instant.
Teach? Again?
What has gotten into you, child? Do you want to be held back again?
Hey! It's so not cool. And this isn't the time for that.
This is no time to worry about what is cool. Now get back to school this instant!
Back off! I'm gonna do whatever it takes to win. Even if you back to the first grade.
That is no way to talk to your teacher. Do not disobey me! You are going to continue?
Sorry, but I gotta win that money.
Please, tell me why money is so important.
The orphanage I grew up in is almost broke. They were my only family.
Why did you not confide in me?
Like you care. This is my fight. So forget me. I'm just another dropout. Go take care of the students who give a damn.
Miss Welsh!
So here's a point. So Candy Cane, in the context of Rumble Roses, which came in the demo disc for PlayStation 2, is in my opinion has a schoolgirl-like plot and development to her, which has some interesting implications for how the character might be perceived. For example, a primary school child buying or playing the demo disc might actually perceive it in a specific way. And here are some videos which you might find interesting. So here's a point. So Candy Cane, in the context of Rumble Roses, which came in the demo disc for PlayStation 2, is in my opinion has a schoolgirl-like plot and development to her, which has some interesting implications for how the character might be perceived. For example, a primary school child buying or playing the demo disc might actually perceive it in a specific way. And here are some videos which you might find interesting. So here's another thing about how children could have been introduced to pornography at an early age, and how the video game industry was initially funded by the pornography industry. So the video game industry did not intend themselves, I imagine, to be funded by the pornography industry, but in the beginning the pornographic industry did actually kind of fund the video game industry. So Freeview in the UK was one example of how people could have been how children could be exposed to pornographic content. So Freeview in the UK used to exist. Nowadays it's been replaced by a satellite like FreeSat, but Freeview in the UK brought entertainment, news and culture to the masses and made society better, with many pornographic TV stations once being available on the service known as Freeview, which is no longer available, which I think is correct. Some of these pornographic TV stations are known as Babe Station, and they had hard-working, beautiful girls on there, which was interesting because some insomniac kids, or kids that were awake because, for example, their parents hadn't gotten home early enough or kids with a sleeping disorder might have potentially been exposed to pornographic content while flicking the channel or looking at the TV late night. And I think that many of these channels, as far as I'm aware, were not password protected, and they could have easily been exposed to this kind of pornographic content, which might have made them addicted to pornography earlier on. Okay, so this is a bioscience model of what I found regarding pornographic addiction. So I'm not an expert or an expert in as in being a healthcare professional, but here's some models. So there are two models which can potentially explain pornographic addiction. There might be more, I'm not sure, but two of them are the reward circuit model and the incentive salientization hypothesis. So the reward circuit model and the incentive salientization hypothesis. So these are two biological theories which might explain how pornographic addiction occurs. The reward circuit model is that over time the dopaminergic system and the reward circuitry gets influenced, and people and even children might have different tendencies to choose pornography earlier on. Some people might be like, no, I need to do it, and some people might be like, some people might have genes where they already feel like they can keep to themselves, and whereas other children on the playground may be wanting to play things like Pokemon more than other children. And the incentive salientization hypothesis is that over time people become more and more addicted to pornography, and over time they need like hardcore content and like unique, edgy, like taboo content. So you might start off playing Candy Cane and then go on to like Mum, Son, or like other like hardcore pornography and stuff like that. Okay, so regarding the incentive salientization hypothesis, it's interesting because, as I previously mentioned, it discusses potentially, or looks at whether children, teenagers, and adults go from using low level softcore pornography to hardcore pornography. And this incentive salientization hypothesis, from what I've looked up, is complex, and the behaviour of individuals on porn sites seems to be complex. Although I don't have access to the personal content, I don't know whether things like cookies or other stuff are used to have a look at this. So it is interesting because I've also considered to myself, why do some porn users only look at certain types of porn while others do not? Some porn categories, some users of porn only use certain categories of porn, like mum, son, or incest porn or something like that, whereas others do not. Some people also watch the entire video of a porn video. Some people watch the entirety of a porn video, while others also do not. So there's a variety of ways this could be looked into, but psychometrics in psychology is one of the ways that this could be done. So I genuinely think that improving porn addiction to porn sites can be done in a way that does not necessarily have to limit, repress, or like negatively impact like porn producers or stuff like that. Which I think is an interesting idea. Normally, when you regulate an industry or may sanction it, sometimes that is potentially harming the industry, but I think that this might not have to be done. So here's another one. Are pornographic stories more addictive than others? So even though pictures are more graphical, some erotic stories, so erotic stories can be found on the web, which are pornographic stories which you can read in a way, and they're not always visual. So some content is that is not allowable on most pornographic websites is actually allowed. So for example, there's some stories depicting like reduction stories on sites like Literotica. So some of these videos on these stories are incredibly creative, and depict some really graphical things like barbed wire in a woman's pussy and stuff like that, which would never be seen in many porn videos. So erotic literature is interesting because you think about whether they can, how they should be categorized, and some porn sites are not really porn sites but really like conglomerates of porn sites, things like Dumbzilla and the Porn Dude. And it's interesting to think about on the topic of porn sites how algorithms differ between porn sites. So, for example, and also how pornography is categorized. For example, on the website Rule 34, which features things like cartoon porn and among other things, it's interesting to think about how pornography categorized with clip chandelier, with subcategories of pictures that'd be bad. For example, clip chandelier hanging off a clitoris. That is really weird. I've never seen it, but it's probably impossible in real life, but weird. So lately there have been newer genres of porn, so things like trap, sissy, and femboy sites. And lately there's been various other sites that are used to actually to do things. So, for example, nowadays, I'm not really sure about this, but I've been told that I've been looking things up about how some people are able to one-on-one, like sell pictures of themselves to one-on-one fans and stuff. So here's like a spectrum of pornographic content. It's not even a fucking joke. So you go from things like some literature sites, so ASSTR archives, to Heavy R, there's the porn compilations. There's things like Clockwork Orange, which has a famous rape scene, and things like that Serbian film. So some videos border up between the line between consent and consent, but not all people who view rapists like pornography would like to like pornography become rapists. So that was interesting. And a Serbian film is interesting because, I'm sorry, there was a famous newborn porn scene for anyone that wants to see it, but I wouldn't recommend seeing it. So as I've mentioned, pornography, in my opinion, in the early areas of the video game industry might be used to fund it. And you can look at things like the original PlayStation magazine, which I think is the original PlayStation magazine, which I found. So with the new Lara Croft and things like that, or Risque Lara Croft, and then other things like, I don't know whether this is a magazine, Martians Go Home, Invasion from Beyond. So it's interesting what the early video game magazines had porn adverts in them, like texting, in which you could text for a porn pic, or they had visually graphic adverts for sexy talk or sex work highlines. And based on my research, this was only the case in some countries. The United Kingdom, for example, had these adverts, but the official Australian PlayStation 2 magazine did not have this due to what I believe were strict rules from the get-go. So I'm sorry. So this means that these pornographic adverts that you see above were not necessarily found in the Australian version of the PlayStation 2 magazine. So the Australian children or millennials were not necessarily heavily subject to that risk of being exposed to pornography and becoming pornographic addicted. And this is just another example of some text-to-speech adverts that you might find in some original PlayStation 2 official magazines. So this is potentially dangerous for a child and potentially risking their pornographic addiction after exposing them to pornography, with some of these pictures being very, very, very risque. So there's a porn spectrum, as we can discuss. We're discussing various things from video games to like various types of erotic storybooks. There's a porn spectrum, so it is interesting. So it goes from softcore to a variety of fetishes and other things. So softcore pornography, as a definition, according to the internet, is commercial but still photographic film or that has pornographic erotic component but is less sexually graphic or intrusive than hardcore pornography, defined by lack of visual sexual penetration. Softcore pornography includes strict pieces, lingerie modeling, simulated sex, and emphasis on sensual appreciation of the human form. It typically contains nude or semi-nude actors involved in love scenes and intended to be sexually arousing and aesthetically beautiful. The distinction between softcore pornography and erotic pornography, such as Virgo girls and pin-ups, is largely a matter of debate. So, pornography therefore goes from a spectrum from X-Hamster to Pornhub to Heavier. So where are the spectrum? There's interesting set of things like lolicon and shotacon. So Japanese popular culture, lolicon is also a genre of fictional media in which young girl characters appear in romantic or sexual content. The term of English word Lolita and complex also refers to to design affection for such characters slowly, and fans of such characters and works associated with unrealistic stylized imagery within manga, anime, video game, and iconic otaku culture is often understood as distinct from desires for realistic depictions of girls as such. It's associated with the concept of male feelings of affection and love for fictional characters as often are key characters in the manga anime. The phrase later complex derived from novel Lolita and introduced in Japan in the 1970s. And sexual imagery of shoujo idealized young girl was expanding the country's medium. During the lolicon boom in the manga of the early 1980s, the term was adopted in the nascent otaku culture to denote the attraction to the early shoujo girl characters, but later to only young-looking depictions of younger designs became more varied. The artwork of the boom strongly influenced by the styles of shoujo manga. Okay, so that was the Wikipedia thing, and that got cut off. But Shotokan is the other alternative, abbreviated from the Shotoro complex. In Japanese context, is basically the attraction to a young or young-looking characters, or media centered around this attraction. This term refers to a genre of manga and anime where prepubescent male characters are depicted in a suggestive erotic manner, whether in the obvious role of object of attraction or the less apparent role of subject the character the reader is designed to associate with. In some stories, the male character is paired with a male, usually in a homoerotic manner, which is still common in boys' love with recommends for female readers, but some of these works are male motifs, such as Boku no Pico. In other words, he's paired with a male female, which the general community would call shoujo. In some works, the shoujo character is paired with an... Okay, here's some fire stuff. So yif is a slang term used in fire fandom to refer to pornographic content. It's considered tongue-in-cheek, a tongue-in-cheek joke in the fire fandom. The term is also used in a way to insult members of the fire fandom, such as in the phrase yif in hell. Fire conventions have strict policies regulating where yif artwork can be displayed or sold. In history, the origin of the term is unclear. However, according to that, yif have been in the fandom. Fan service is a material in which in a work of fiction or in a fictional series that is intentionally added to please the audience, often sexual nature, such as nudity. The term originated in Japan in the manga fandom, but has been used in other languages and media, which is about servicing of the fan, giving the fans exactly what they want. Fan service is also referred by means of text, symbol, image, and sound from the stories that contain visual elements. When anime and manga were translated to English by US companies, the original work was often edited to remove some of the fan service, making it more appropriate for US audiences. Mike Tatsuwanga explained this change as a difference between the cultural values of Japan and the US, so this practice has become much less common and poorly regarded by anime fans. In fact, some import licenses have little more than fan service as their selling point. Today, especially outside anime and manga, the term has been expanded to hold a wider meaning. This includes any elements, be it visual nods, referencing older, forgotten media relating to material, and plot details otherwise that are not needed by the actual character. Actual plot or character development, but are included as nods to or pandering to long-term bans of the material, especially in the context of sequels or prequels or later seasons of series. Taylor Swift has been referred to as the ringmaster of fan service for her use of cryptic clues in her lyrics and accompanying media.